big bet against the dollar. I don't see it going up with all the liquidity we have coming in next year, and that will bode well for other parts of the world, especially emerging markets.
So, Andrew, what do you say to somebody who's taken some nice profits this year, has money to put to work into the new year? Where should they put it to work?
Well, I mean, first of all, we had a big downdraft in April, and that created a wonderful opportunity. I know that in the midterm year, you tend to get a downdraft, and people will say it's the end of the cycle or excessive or some point. And I'll be counseling people again to take advantage of that. We will get a correction at some point next year for reasons we don't necessarily know about. But I suspect we'll start the year relatively strong, and it will pull money in, and then we'll get a downdraft, and people will panic and want to sell. And that's just the opposite of what you should do.
All right, Andrew. Hope everybody's listening out there. That is Morgan Stanley's Andrew Sliman.
Can I also add, Merry Christmas, Andrew. And thank you so much for all the time that you spent with us this year. Hopefully we can get you back on open interest soon. Again, Andrew Sliman there from Morgan Stanley. Let's get a check on what's going on in the markets right now. We are only about 10 minutes into the session, but looking at gains about 0.4%. So we're up about 30 points right now on the S&P 500. This is the move screen. I think the most dynamic way to look at stocks on the Bloomberg or indexes on the Bloomberg. You can see the breadth is very positive to the upside. 370 stocks gaining, only 132 down. And the NVIDIA story, Reuters reporting earlier that they're going to be shipping more chips to China than previously expected, helping that stock up 1.2%. Not a huge jump, but it adds 6 points to the S&P 500. Tesla also doing well on a story that the pay package, believe it or not, Elon Musk's massive pay package before he had a really massive pay package has been okayed in Delaware by a high court there. Meta and Palantir up as well. Apple, Microsoft, Google, Broadcom, Netflix, all to the downside. So this chunk of the Mag 7, if you'll, I guess, grade 8 if you want to include Broadcom, is a weight on the index today. So even though breadth is overwhelmingly to the upside, watch this space because it could drag us down. Here are the GETTR. These are the S&P 500 industry groups that we watch. Energy is the biggest gainer on the day. And as I said, it's also one of the cheapest industry groups. Actually, I think the cheapest if you look at forward PEs. And, Bonnie, this is an interesting point because I was listening to Lori Calvasina earlier on Bloomberg Radio, and she was saying she's just traveled through Europe and she's had client meetings across the U.S. People want cheap right now, and that's definitely what energy is.
Not easy to find it in markets like this, that's for sure, Matt. Coming up, it's not just stocks climbing. Oil happens to be rebounding today amid geopolitical tensions in Venezuela, Ukraine, and the Middle East. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
And I'm Jason Kelly, and we're back with another season of The Duo, with athletes and entrepreneurs who are changing the game on and off the field. Jerry Jones.
Hello, this is DrPaulCottrell. We are live streaming on Rumble, YouTube, and simulcasting on X Spaces. You can also watch both versions of the live stream on my website, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Please share the links, ask your social media to follow me. There's lots of ways to follow the work that I do. All this is for free. Please help support by sharing the links and asking your social media to follow me. You can follow me on X and GETTR, Substack, TikTok, YouTube, Brighteon, Bitchute, and Rumble, Patreon. So with that, what we're going to do is listen into CNBC.
us now to talk technicals ahead of a shortened trading week. Chris Verone, partner and chief market strategist at Strategas Research Partners. How's Trenner?
He's doing much better, Script.
He is?
Yeah, really so.
Give him our best.
I certainly will.
Christmas. Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
That you're talking about here. You say that the rotational tape has been persisting, which makes you think 2026 this could be a sign of it continuing, which would be really a fundamental shift. I think from the more speculative, I guess, parts of the market to the more economically sensitive parts of the market. You think the economy is strong?
Yeah, I think so. I certainly think that the market is saying that the soft patch of 3Q and 4Q is probably over here and is looking through it. We've been on this idea that the real economy is inflecting up. And I think you see it in the market's message with transports and regional banks and discretionary. We're all starting to inflect at a time where I think the backdrop of lower inflation, modest bond yields are all supportive into 26.
I also foreshadowed what you were going to say about the 10-year, which is not, yields are not below 4%. They tried to, but they didn't get there. They're back up. People have noted in people that are sympathetic to bond vigilante thinking and worried about, I don't know what, cutting rates, inflation coming back, whatever it is. You're not really seeing that much angst, but it's not below 4%. You say don't worry till 4.5%.
Yeah, and I think you got to be a little careful what you wish for. I'm not sure we want bond yield a lot below 4%. What would that say about the economy into 26 if you had yields at 3.75 or some number like that? If you're going to get alarmed about bonds, look more globally. I mean, German 30s are breaking out, Aussie 10s have broken out, CAD 10s are higher. So it's not really U.S. where I think the angst on yields should be. It's more global here.
All right, so then that's not something you're concerned about at this point. The rotation that you're seeing into the real economy stocks is not just in the United States.
It's basically everywhere we look. I mean, look at the commodity-sensitive corners of the world, whether it's Australia or Canada. I mean, you've seen copper inflect, you've seen aluminum turn up.
What does that say? So you just said that you worry about bonds and other rates going lower in other countries because they're not as strong, I guess, relative to the U.S. But there's a global upswing going on in economies around the world.
I think, Joe, it's important to remember that most central banks have been easing for the past 15 months. So the lag benefits of that are now starting to show up in the industrial economy. The commodity market, I think, is a very appropriate reflection of that here. I mean, look at the long-term charts on copper, major breakout, aluminum, major breakout, all the related issues, the Freeports and the Rios and the Valets and the BHP have turned up everywhere. So I think there's industrial momentum into 26 that is finally starting to migrate over to the U.S., where you've seen, again, stuff like transports waking up for the first time in 3 years. They've been off the playing field. The fact that we have regional banks getting involved here, I think, is a reflection of a steeper curve. That's good, not bad. The discretionary stocks are also still playing nicely in this environment. So when you look at kind of the real economy signals into 26, I do think it suggests there's this handoff away from just the speculative corners of the tape to something more real.
And you don't try to figure out why it's happening. You just see that it is happening. Is there anything to the notion that they're reshoring that we're trying to do is starting to happen? That companies are coming back here because it's easier to make things here?
So I thought about this a lot with respect to the commodity call in particular. And you could have 3 or 4 reasons why commodities are up right now. You could say, listen, in fact, the cyclical momentum is improving. That's certainly reasonable. You could say it's resource hoarding. That's certainly a reasonable view here as well. You could also say this is the raw material necessary for the next leg of the AI story. So I'm not sure which of those 3 reasons is correct, but I think if you're the stocks, it doesn't matter. The stocks are blunt instruments, and the stocks are responding to it irrespectively. So again, whether it's Freeport finally starting to work, Southern Copper just breaking out, I mean, these are very powerful price signals that I think the economy is on pretty decent footing into 26.
Were the Mag 7 or the stocks benefiting from the AI boom? Do those represent speculative parts of the market or real economy parts of the market, or a little bit of both? And
I think a little bit.
What do they do next? What do they do next?
I think when you look at the hood ornaments of what the real speculative trade have been, whether it's Bitcoin or kind of the real speculative issues like the OCLOs and the nuclear stuff, I think the market's moving on from that. And Bitcoin's probably been telling us that for 4 or 5 months now. There's this view this whole time that, Bitcoin weaker than NASDAQ would have to follow. I don't really buy that. I think what Bitcoin has simply told us is the market is ready to.
What's NVIDIA? Speculative or real economy?
NVIDIA is still in an uptrend, is what that is. And I think we got to be careful that we don't get too kind of wrapped around the axle of, oh my God, Mag 7's underperforming. I mean, listen, Apple's at a new high, Google's at a new high, NVIDIA is fine. If you're looking for weak stuff in Mag 7, it's basically Microsoft and Meta.
Elon Musk is at a new high.
Tesla trades great. So this is, I think at worst rotational right here. And, as they sold some of the Mag 7 or some of the techs, what has emerged in its wake is frankly healthcare. I mean, healthcare looks as good as it has in 3 or 4 years here. So I'm not convinced that this rotational move is the end of the market.
All right. We're gonna go to a video about Venezuela, but before we do, because the market is open, I want to go over what I think is going on here. So the S&P 500 is trading at 6,864. You want to take a look at the VIX. The VIX is really low, but this is holiday trading, so who knows what's going on. And the yen is trading at 156.9. Natural gas was trading pre-market at about 4.1, and then dropped down at about 8 o'clock this morning. And it's trading at 3.8. So there's some volatility in natural gas. Oil is trading at 57.83. So it's slowly ticking up. It was trading at 56 handle. Now it's slowly ticking up. And I've been saying, I think there will be a $4 to $5 spike once we start doing major operations against Venezuela. I suspect that natural gas will also go up into the low 4 handle. So like 4.1, 4.2. So what I'm doing is I'm longing oil and I'm longing natural gas, waiting for that pop. Once that happens, then I'm going to short oil. And I don't know what I'm going to do with natural gas yet. But that's what I think is going to happen with oil. Now with the S&P 500, we're trading at 6,863. I still have a target year end of 6,850. So if you've been paying attention to me and you made your 18%, 23%, depending on how you invested, you might want to take some money off the table, all right, now, and just close out your positions. Or what you might want to do is just take half out and then wait until the beginning of the year, maybe the second week of trading, and then decide where you want to put your money in. But it's reached the target that I've had. I still think at year end, it's going to be around 6,850. This might go down a little bit today or go up a little bit, and then another trading day it might go down a little bit. I don't think it's going to be way above the 6,850 mark. So it depends on what you want to do. But that's my take on it. Now, in terms of the euro, it's trading at 117. So we have a little bit of a weakness of the dollar right now. And the 10-year bond is trading at, right now, I think a 4 handle. Hold on, let me take a look here. The 10-year bond is trading at 4.163. All right. So that's a little bit of my overview of the market right now. But the big thing to focus on is what will the United States do with Venezuela within the next few days? Will Trump hit Venezuela this year, or will he wait until next year? Some people are thinking, well, Trump may be hitting Venezuela next year, and he's just starting to pick off the oil tankers, right? And just capture those oil tankers, and then hit narco terrorists, throughout the year, throughout this month. and then do the major operations in January. I'm a little surprised he hasn't done the operations. Now, historically, just going back to historical precedents here, George Washington crossed the Delaware River to kill our enemy, the Germans, who were fighting for the British, on New Year's Eve. I would not be surprised that Trump does some sort of operation actually on New Year's Eve. I could be wrong, you know, maybe he just wants to give the troops, you know, some rest during the holidays. But I would not be surprised. I think it would be for the ages if he did that. But I don't know. But when he does, when the major operations do happen, I suspect a $4 to $5 spike in oil. But it's not going to last. And therefore, you long the futures and then you short the futures. Okay. That's my take. That's what I'm doing. Right? I'm long in oil right now, waiting for that $4 or $5 hit when we hit Venezuela. Now, maybe it never happens. Oil supplies are increasing. So, you know, there is a little bit of risk here. But with financial trading, if there isn't risk, there isn't reward. So you just have to engage the risk. If you're always going, oh, I'm afraid of the risk, then you just should not be trading at all. But, you know, if you can digest some risk, then trading's okay. So don't worry about it. All right. With that, that's my take with oil and with the equity market for the S&P 500. Before we go to the Venezuela oil tanker clip here that I'm going to play, please help support the work that I do. I do all these videos for free. I tell you how to trade the market and also how to improve your health and wellness. All right. This is a protocol that I do every day to slow down the aging process. I'm in my 50s, and the reason why I am healthy is because of this holistic approach. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nano silver soaps that will help to neutralize and help the health of your skin. It has no fancy chemicals from Procter & Gamble. It's very high quality soap, and it's something that I use every day. You can get it in charcoal, tea tree, lemongrass, in lavender and peppermint. All right, lavender and peppermint. Get a few bars for your household and help the health of your skin, especially when you feel that it's dry or you're having some problems and you want to improve the complexion of the skin. It's a very high quality soap. Get it, use it every day. And also, Max 35 and Cleanse. Max 35 is 35 parts per million. Cleanse is 30 parts per million. They're at different price points, but you use them the same way. Take a teaspoon a day, every day. Swish it in your mouth, gargle about 20 seconds, and then swallow it. What this will do is boost up your immune system. How it works is it improves your oral cavity and your oral pharynx, maintains your mucosal barrier, and helps the health of your epithelial cells. When you do this regularly, you're neutralizing, you're improving your oral cavity, you're helping those epithelial cells. And guess what? Your immune system gets boosted up. When you do that every day, you're not as sick. And when you're not as sick, your body can remodel in areas to help slow down the aging process. But if you're chronically sick all the time, even if it's something benign, like the common cold, guess what? You have the common cold for about 5 to 7 days, you feel better. Guess what? Your body still has to remodel the damaged tissue. It's called reversible necrosis. And it takes 2 to 3 weeks to remodel reversible necrosis. 2 weeks. So if you're sick for 1 week and it takes 2 weeks to heal the body, even though you feel better, and you're sick 3 times a year, 9 weeks out of the year, your body isn't focusing on other things. And this is the very reason why people that get sick all the time, even if it's benign, because of the common cold, you age faster. You build up more free radicals and you have higher inflammation. It's very simple. It's very simple. So go to my store, get the Max 35 or the Cleanse, boost up the immune system, take it every day. If you're not feeling well, take a teaspoon or 2 a day Or if someone around you is not feeling well, take it prophylactically, a teaspoon or two a day. Once everything's all clear, go back to your maintenance dose of a teaspoon. You should be doing it every day, and it's something that I have been doing as a protocol for more than 5 years. Okay, with that, I just told you how to boost up your immune system. Now let's listen into what's going on with Venezuela and the third oil tanker.
Pursuing a third dark fleet oil tanker near Venezuela after President Trump seized a second tanker this weekend, disrupting illegal trade worth $8 billion.
I did see that this is another ship that was basically operating in the black market. And so there's been a little bit of black market activity in the oil sector to go to sanctioned countries and to get them some oil. And they're getting that oil in order to avoid, the reforms that we think would make the countries a better place. And so it's not a lot of oil compared to world supply. And so I don't think that people need to be worried here in the U.S. that prices are going to go up because of these seizures of these ships. There's just a couple of them, and they were black market ships.
Former Deputy National Security Advisor Victoria Coates joins me now. Victoria, great to see you as always. That's Kevin Hassett talking about the economic impact of this, essentially saying nothing to see here. But overall, how significant are these oil tanker seizures, and where do you see all of this going?
Well, good morning, Carly. Good to be with you. Now, this is very important in terms of getting Nicolas Maduro out of Venezuela. These so-called shadow tankers, these are old vessels that aren't properly maintained. They're not properly flagged. They don't follow the rules of commercial shipping. So they're actually quite a liability that you could have an accident really easily with them. But they're Maduro's essentially dark money ATM. They're the way he keeps cash flowing into Venezuela under our sanctions. And it is perfectly legal for us to interdict them when we come across them on the high seas. So this third one, the Bella, so-called, is now being pursued by the U.S. Coast Guard. And that is then oil that we can sell, put the money in an escrow account for the Venezuelan people. And as Kevin said, this is not a ton of oil in the grand scheme of things. And because of President Trump's great energy policies, we don't need that oil. That's just a slush fund for Maduro. So I think the sooner we cut it off, the better.
Wall Street Journal has a piece out right now titled U.S. Oil Blockade of Venezuela Pushes Cuba Towards Collapse.
First of all, we do need the oil. Why? There are different densities or viscosities of oil. The oil that comes out of Venezuela is heavy crude. Most of the oil that we have is light sweet crude. Our plants need some heavy crude to add to the mixture. The reason why we have a lot of light sweet is because a lot of it's coming from fracking. It's more liquid. It's not as viscous. The stuff that's coming out of Venezuela is heavy crude, and we do need it. 100% sure we need it. So here we have on Fox News, and she doesn't even know petroleum engineering.
The communist-ruled island was already suffering from food shortages, blackouts, and an exodus of people. Now it faces the loss of cheap oil from Nicolas Maduro. Do you think that's the ultimate goal here, Victoria, to collapse these anti-American regimes, first in Venezuela and then second, much closer to home, in Cuba?
I think they're all related, Carly, and I'd throw Nicaragua into that club as well. We've had some really positive trends in Latin America for the United States. We've just had President-elect Cast in Chile. We have President Milei in Argentina. These are very pro-American, reform-minded presidents of these countries that can help us with everything from drugs to immigration. They can help us repatriate supply chains here into our own hemisphere. But yes, remember, Cuba, right off the shores of Florida, so close to the United States, has been a hostile regime for more than 50 years. To have now this pressure being put on Cuba, which is dependent first on Russia, but then also on Venezuela, to have that change would be an incredibly good thing for the United States. And we have to remember that our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is of Cuban descent. I know this is of great interest to him.
Right. That's a great point there on Marco Rubio and his personal interests when it comes to Cuba. Moving over to the Middle East, things are not slowing down there because Israel is very concerned that Iran is expanding its ballistic missile program, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is apparently going to be speaking with President Trump at some point this week and giving the president options for attacking Iran again. How significant could this be?
Well, I think it's important what you might call maintenance. After the 12-day war in the spring, both the United States and Israel said that there had been severe damage done both to Iran's nuclear program and to their missiles, but that both countries reserve the right to go back in and to do more maintenance if necessary, if the Iranians tried to reconstitute. And the Israelis seem to think that there is evidence that is happening. I tend to believe them. They generally know what's happening in their backyard, just like the Western Hemisphere is our backyard. And so, yes, I think the Prime Minister will talk to President Trump. He's coming to Mar-a-Lago on January 29th for further consultations. This would be, I believe, his 5th trip to the United States this year. It's historic, unprecedented.
This goes back to what I was saying when we used the B-2s to knock out the nuclear facilities. We had an opportunity to kill the Ayatollah. We didn't take it. Israel had the opportunity to knock out the Ayatollah, and Trump told Netanyahu not to do it. We wouldn't have this problem if the Ayatollah was dead. See, Trump chickened out. He was worried that something, was going to happen. He chickened out the same reasons why George Bush Sr. chickened out during Desert Storm. Now, just imagine what would have happened if actually George Bush Sr. didn't chicken out. A lot of the problems that we had post 9/11 in the Middle East would have been mitigated. Kicking the can down the road only makes things more expensive, more people get killed, either military personnel and bystanders. The collateral damage increases. And wars today cost a lot more money because we need the smart bombs. Because heaven forbid that you have collateral damage. And our military is saying, you know what? We spent a lot of money building an armory of smart weapons, but we need some dumb weapons now because it just costs too much. And that the moment you start doing a large push militarily, you burn out all of your supply. Oh. Can we literally afford every time we launch a missile $2 million or more compared to a few tens of thousands on a dumb bomb? So here's the point I'm making. Because we didn't finish the job when we knocked out the nuclear facilities and let democracy flourish in Iran, because they have a very large secular society that is against the Ayatollah, that's against the theocracy. Let that flourish. No, we have to make sure that Netanyahu's still, or that the Ayatollah is still there, so Netanyahu can, keep on having his war in the Middle East. If you knock out the root cause, Israel won't be fighting anymore. Well, if you keep the root cause there, Israel always has a reason to fight. So we have to, what we should have done was knocked out the Ayatollah. We didn't. All right. So now we have problems again with the Ayatollah. Amazing how that works.
Between the United States and Israel, and then
Right.
judging from the success.
So if this starts ramping up, this was the main point I was making. If this starts ramping up, and further conflict starts to boil up in the Middle East, what do you think oil is going to do? What do you think oil is going to do? Think it's going to go down? Or do you think it's going to go up?
If there's more action needed on Iran, I would judge that they're going to be successful.
Former Deputy National Security Advisor Victoria Cotu, thank you so much for joining us to break down both of these important topics.
Okay. So
I'm Steve Juicy.
what I want to do before we go to the $11 billion arms move and how this is a deterrence against China, I want to talk about Bitcoin really, really quick here. Bitcoin's trading at 90,000. If you've been paying attention to Bitcoin, it's been bouncing around. It's going to like 90, 91, and then drops back down to 87. And are there buyers at 100,000? Will there be buyers at 150 or 200,000? See, as Bitcoin keeps on going up, who's going to buy it? Sure as hell ain't going to be the retail investor. Well, you can buy fractions of a coin. So maybe we're seeing an S curve in terms of demand for the product. And that 100,000 is like the magic limit. Now it could go up more, but you got a lot of whales that are manipulating the market. What's the probability that Strategy, the company that buys Bitcoin and is financing it, they basically take loans out or sell bonds, sell corporate paper to buy Bitcoin? What's the probability that Strategy in the next 5 years is bankrupt? Probably pretty high. Especially as Bitcoin keeps on going up and then all of a sudden there's no buyers. All right? We're kind of seeing it right now. Where's the buyers? The ETF wrappers, people are bailing out of the ETF wrappers. So I'm very, 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 very bearish on Bitcoin. All right? I made some money on Bitcoin. But the thing is that it's a manipulated market. And the thing is that it's not worth the risk. You're better off trading oil. At least you understand that. At least you can see it. You can see a barrel of oil and how it's either increasing inventories or not. You can understand how it's used in the economy. How is the Bitcoin used in the economy? If someone says, oh, it's going to be a storage of value. How can you be a storage of value when it's volatile? Well, it's going to just keep on appreciating. Really? Is it? Is it? Just imagine if Strategy went bankrupt, how many Bitcoins would have to be dumped into the market? Who's going to buy it? Then all of a sudden you have a liquidity issue, and all of a sudden the price drops to 20,000. It'll go from 90 or 100 or 120 to 20,000 if Strategy was liquidated, because they have so much of it. And then the behavioral finance with investors that bought before the crash of Strategy, what would happen? They will never buy Bitcoin again if they were burned from, let's say they bought at 90 or 100 and then it went down to 20,000 or less. You think an investor would go back in? That's not how investors work if you really analyze the behavior of the retail investor. So I personally think that Bitcoin is a scam. Can you make some money? Very short term. But it's not something that is a long-term thing. It's too volatile. But you can, it's a storage of value. Really. Try to buy a pizza with Bitcoin. Try to sell a pizza with Bitcoin. What do you sell it at? It changes so rapidly. You're either losing money on your pizza that you're selling or you're making money on the pizza you're selling, depending on the movement of the currency. Currencies that move in a volatile way are not, let me repeat, not a storage of value. Now, how is Bitcoin any different than having a printing press that is designed in such a way that you're printing monopoly money, but you can only print 2 million, $1,000 bills of monopoly money? And the moment that you print 2 million monopoly bills, the printing press stops and you can't, it doesn't print anymore. How's that any different? And we're to believe that we're going to buy Big Macs with monopoly money? That's exactly what Bitcoin is. All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. If you're 40 years of age or older, your cellular metabolism doesn't function as properly. Let me tell you how to reboot it. Vitamin B complex. Vitamin B complex, the first 4 B vitamins, helps the electron transport chain within your mitochondria. That will help to boost up your ATP levels, which is an energy source for your cells and your tissues. So you're going to have more ATP, you're going to have healthier mitochondria. Super important, because when you age, your ATP goes down, the health of your mitochondria goes down. So you want to boost up that mitochondrial health and boost up those ATP levels. Vitamin B complex will increase your cellular metabolism, and vitamin B complex has vitamin B12 to help to protect your neurons. You want to maintain that myelin sheath, and when you do that, your neurons, your nerves will conduct faster. That means that your cognition's faster. That means your memory's faster. That also means that your kinematics are faster. If you notice, older people, they move slower. Now, you ever wonder why that is? Part of it is the way their cerebellum is starting to deteriorate. Part of it's the midbrain is starting to deteriorate, but it's also the myelin sheath of the nerve. And it's not conducting properly. You want to protect that. You can do that by getting the vitamin B complex from my store. I just told you how to slow down the aging process. All right. Let's listen in how we're going to deter China.
Welcome back. We've got breaking news this morning. China's foreign ministry claims that the U.S. violated international law after intercepting a China-bound oil tanker off of the Venezuelan coast. This comes just days after President Trump announced a full blockade of all sanctioned oil tankers traveling in and out of Venezuela. The U.S. reportedly pursuing a third sanctioned oil tanker as well on Sunday. Joining me now is GETTR Institute senior fellow Gordon Chang. Gordon, your reaction?
Well, Merry Christmas. I think that the Trump administration is doing the right thing. For decades, the international community, through the Security Council of the UN and through other bodies, have imposed these sanctions on various bad actors, but has very rarely enforced them. Kudos to President Trump for saying, look, we're going to enforce the rules. Because if you don't enforce the rules, what's the point of having them? So this is a significant turn, not only for Venezuela and the United States, but for the international community at large.
Yeah, I mean, look, China says the U.S. violated international law, but the Trump administration has been very clear about what it is doing around, in and out of Venezuela.
Yes, and what we're doing is we are going after tankers that have changed their names, that have done sailing under false flags, all sorts of bad acts. And of course, the oil is sanctioned in the first place. So this is important. We've got to remember fundamentally that Venezuela is a narco state. It has assaulted the United States in various ways. And President Trump is saying, look, we're just not going to put up with this. And this is really important for the international community to see President Trump exert political will to enforce aims that are not only great for America, but also great for the rest of the international community and world.
Yeah, so is China supporting Venezuela, or is this that China was there at a time that the U.S. is getting deeper and pushing back further against Venezuela?
China has consistently supported Venezuela, and we've seen this over the last several months with all of these rhetorical statements. China now believes that it can sort of divert the Trump administration by creating problems in Asia, but I don't think that that will be successful, because China knows ultimately that it cannot stop these seizures of tankers. It doesn't have the military power to do it. So China is going to bluster, but at the end of the day, the Trump administration is going to exert its will.
Yeah. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has launched a review of NVIDIA's latest batch of advanced H200 AI chips. This could be the company's first shipment to China, which President Trump apparently is allowing, something President Trump said he would allow NVIDIA to do. I spoke with the CEO of the...
Looks like it's swole season. Gotta keep up with SoFi. It's stacked. Really? How much can it lift? It can help lift you to financial independence. You can earn more money on your money. What? With SoFi Bank's highest savings APY. What?
Open a SoFi checking and savings account to get up to 4.30% APY.
NVIDIA to do. I spoke with the CEO of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, last month on competing in China, and he was all in on sending those chips there. Watch this.
I hope for NVIDIA to be able to go back and compete in market in China. In the last 4 years, the administration really set us on a path that really backfired. The policies have really backfired. From a 95% market share in the China market, which is one of the most important markets in the world, when President Trump left office, NVIDIA's market share in China is now 0%. I hope we're able to revert back to the policies of the Trump 45 administration and get back into the market and compete.
What do you make of this, Gordon? Look, I mean, China's chip manufacturers are reportedly working to upgrade production equipment to bypass the global export controls. But we know that the president said, we think it would be okay for NVIDIA to send those chips to China. What are your thoughts here?
Jensen Huang will say anything to sell chips to China. The important point here is that China was always going to get to the point where it would not buy American chips. This is the Made in China 2025 plan, and this has been a number of plans that China has publicly announced. So Jensen Huang is wrong to blame the Trump administration for the drop in NVIDIA's sales in China. This was always going to happen. We do not want NVIDIA or any other company providing chips to China over a period where China knows that its local chips are not as good as America's, and they need something to bridge the gap until they can come up with something better. Now, More Threads just announced 2 new chips, which are almost as good as NVIDIA's. This happened just a couple days ago. More Threads is the Chinese chip company that went public this month. But, you know, China knows that it is behind, and we should not be helping China compete against us. It's simple as that. Jensen Huang has all sorts of interests. The United States' interests are very different from his.
I'm wondering if President Trump is playing a game here. I mean, let's not forget that the president is going to be meeting with Xi Jinping in the new year, I believe in April. They're expected to meet. Maybe
Chang, this professor, has a good point. Once these tech bros, like NVIDIA, like Apple, like the Google boys, all right? Once they make their money, they don't care what sort of hellscape they've created for us. You think Jensen Huang really cares? Of course not, he doesn't care. He just wants to sell more chips at inflated stock prices to justify those inflated stock prices. The PE ratios, the price to earnings ratio, is to the moon with NVIDIA. I personally think NVIDIA is way overbought. And you'll notice that NVIDIA stock will crash once the chips from Google and other suppliers start chipping away at the market share for AI. And the demand for building out these mega servers, these hyperscalers, the demand for building those servers starts to decline. And when that happens, NVIDIA stock is going to crash. So what Jensen's trying to do is he's trying to get the market share and justify the high PE ratio. He doesn't care what sort of hellscape he's going to create in 2027 or 2029 when we engage against China in a war in the Pacific. You think NVIDIA cares? Of course not. Because he's got his nuclear bunker somewhere.
And Trump is keeping all his options open until that meeting to see how it goes. He's trying to navigate a very aggressive communist China at a time that we are still locked in and reliant on the China supply chain. He's changing that. Doesn't happen overnight, but he's getting corporate America to bring their supply chains to America. And does he walk a balance and walk a little on eggshells going into this meeting before we're actually reliant, we're no longer reliant on China, because we're not there yet.
I'm sure that's
And
what
let's think
President
about
Trump is
this.
doing.
We should have never been reliant on China. But yet, in the 1980s, and especially the 1990s, people wanted to buy cheap spatulas at Walmart. So the Walmart family ended up being one of the richest families in the United States, maybe even in the world. Not as rich as the Rothschilds, but pretty damn wealthy. By moving manufacturing to China to import cheap spatulas. So Americans would be importing deflation. Meanwhile, Congress was saying, hey, let's spend more money. Let's start issuing more bonds. 2-year bond, the 5-year bond, the 7-year bond, the 10-year bond, the 20-year bond, the 30-year bond, maybe even a 50-year bond soon. And we've racked up $38 trillion of debt and an increased debt to GDP ratio. Our GDP went down because we don't make stuff and we import it from China. And that money that we give to China for cheap spatulas, they decide to get the know-how for higher level of manufacturing and start to vertically integrate and move up the value chain. Meanwhile, our students can't read, write, and do arithmetic. And the money that they have left in China, they buy the bonds that Congress decided to, guess what, have to issue through the Treasury Department because we spend too much money. And Wall Street loved it. You know why? Because it's the paper belt. The paper belt. Wall Street. The lawyers, they create paper. The accountants, they create paper. The lawmakers in DC create paper. Wall Street just moves paper around. The paper belt. They make a lot of money in the paper belt. Meanwhile, the rust belt keeps on rusting because we had a bunch of analysts from Wall Street that decided to move manufacturing to fucking China. Now, who made the money? Was it the middle class? The middle class is having a big problem, if you haven't noticed. But, hey, look at how rich Jansen is. Look how rich Tim Cook is. Larry Ellison from Oracle. He's a rich guy, too. He seems to be buying up everything that has something to do with your metadata. I wonder what he's doing with it. Oh, Oracle used to be a DARPA program.
And, we can question the tactics, we can question all sorts of things, but clearly that's the best strategy. The point about the meeting, though, in April, that's not a good idea for the United States from any number of different perspectives. The Chinese are going to use this as a propaganda tool against the United States. They've already been doing that. They think they can push Trump around. And every time Trump tries to be accommodative to China, they use it to say that the United States is weak. Now, I'm sure President Trump doesn't think he's weak, and he isn't. But that's not important. What's important is what the Chinese think, because that motivates what they do. And they've become much more aggressive under President Trump's watch because of his accommodative efforts. We cannot accommodate communist China, unfortunately. That's just not the way it works with a militant regime.
Yeah, they were rolling over Joe Biden. I mean, give me a break, Joe Biden and his family accepting all that money from communist China, according to the Oversight Committee. They were rolling over Joe Biden. I don't know that they're tougher now because Trump is in charge. I have to push back on that. I mean, President Trump has been the toughest president on China that I've seen in my following all of this. Do you disagree with that?
Well, Trump in the second term is probably as tough as he was in the first term.
Right.
But the point is that China's aggressiveness right now requires a much more robust American response. And so at this point, I think the tactics need to change because, we see China doing all sorts of things that it hasn't done in the past. And that is very worrying.
I don't disagree with that. I spoke with Ram Charan. He is considered the world's best consultant. He's going to be on next Sunday on Sunday Morning Futures. You know what he said to me? He said, one idea is to get FDI, that's foreign direct investment, into China down to zero. He doesn't want to see any foreign direct investment from the U.S. into China. He wants it down to zero. Wait till you see this interview next week. China is now increasing its war threats after the U.S. and Taiwan's groundbreaking $11 billion arms deal, Gordon. Beijing says the deal will not support the, quote, doomed fate of Taiwan's independence, and it will backfire. Do you anticipate China will push its military even harder against Taiwan next year? I mean, the word is in Washington that the expectation is that China goes into Taiwan some way in 2027. That would be the Davidson window. Admiral Davidson came up with that date, 2027. But what's your take in terms of next year?
Next year, I think China pushes very hard against Japan and very hard against the Philippines. I don't think it can push much harder against Taiwan for a lot of reasons. War against Taiwan would be extremely unpopular with the Chinese people, who, by the way, don't want war. But Xi Jinping believes that increasing tensions is in his personal interest, I think. And that means we're going to see even more provocative Chinese actions against weaker countries in the region. And by the way, President Trump's announcement of this $11 billion arms package to Taiwan is really, really good because that reestablishes deterrence, which we obviously need to do right now, considering China's increased rhetoric, plus its moves across the region, from India in the south.
I am very concerned about Taiwan. Why? Because China is going to be belligerent. And it's not going to stop at the first island chains. It's going to put Hawaii, the archipelago of Alaska, our allies like Japan and Guam at risk. The question is, does Trump have the guts to use conventional and unconventional means against China to make sure that the United States has hegemonic power in the Pacific? Now, the problem is that a big part of his base is America first. Just let Taiwan fall. Let Japan fall. It won't matter. But they don't realize that our way of life is predicated on the freedom of navigation in that region, especially around the 9-dash line. So your lifestyle in the United States, by being a pacifist, will radically change and be worse off if you lose the hegemonic power. And that's what I'm worried about with Trump, because Trump is so worried about getting the peace prize. How do you get the peace prize when you send a Tomahawk missile into the Forbidden City, which he should have done already? You know that picture of Mao? We should hit right in the middle of his eyes, right in the middle of his forehead, a Tomahawk missile. Just to tell Xi, you know what, don't fuck with us. But no, we won't do that because, we're prim and proper. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the vitamin C and magnesium. This is going to boost up your immune system and help with your skin and your brain function. A lot of people don't know, but magnesium is super important for brain function. And magnesium will help the efficacy of vitamin D3. Magnesium and zinc boosts up that immune system and helps with brain function. Take them together. Drink filtered water. Should be doing this every day to boost up that immune system and help with brain function. But especially take it in the winter season to boost up that immune system. Now, we know that some things are floating around. You might contract it. Some people have already, especially in high density areas. Boost up that immune system. Super important. The more boosted your immune system is, the better off you are to fight All right? Just like having deterrence in the Pacific. The better prepared you are, the better you'll be able to deter the enemy. All right? So boost up your immune system. Magnesium is super important for brain function also. And my concern is that the aftershock from 2020, many people, especially if they're at age 40 or older, they're increasing the probability of getting early onset of dementia. Why? Because if you have this chronic inflammation at the neuron level, all right, and that microenvironment is inflamed in certain brain tissue, then you're going to start to have, first, your neurons won't produce the neurotransmitters. It will have misfolding of proteins. And what will happen is that the dendritic connections between the neurons will start to recede, and you'll think slower. You'll start to lose your memory. So there's going to be a group of people in the world that are about age 40 plus that are going to increase their chances of early onset of dementia within 5 years because of what we went through in the crisis of 2020. So it's really important to keep that inflammation down and to give the micronutrients that your nerves need. What are those micronutrients? One of the micronutrients is the magnesium, right? But also better blood flow. Because these cohort groups that will get the early onset of dementia because of the aftershock of 2020 will fit into 3 different categories. The first category is microclotting, microbleeding, and at the cerebral level. Well, what that will do is that you will have poor blood flow. And when you have this poor blood flow, it's going to be ischemic, and it will lead to brain tissue to slowly die off. Because it's a microclotting, microbleeding. All right. Now that's due to that inflammation that's taking place at the vascular level. All right, and in the microenvironment around your neurons. So one group will get ischemic and lose brain tissue. So about 30% of people that are 40 plus years of age, in 5 years, 30% of 40 years that are or older will end up getting some level of ischemic dementia. Now there's a spectrum of it, a low level and a higher level. But the totality, the amalgamation of all those individuals, 70% of the 30% will get ischemic dementia. Now this inflammation that is taking place around the neuron will also prevent the neuron from breaking up proteins that are misfolded. And when proteins are misfolded, certain proteins, if they have a high beta sheet concentration, will start to stick together and they start to accumulate. This is called amyloidosis. 24.9% of the cohort group that's 30 years, that is 40 years of age or older, 40 years of age or older, 30% of them will get some sort of early onset of dementia. 24.9% of the 30% will end up getting amyloidosis within 5 years. All right. So it's really important to keep the inflammation down to prevent the misfolding of these proteins and leading to a buildup of plaque, which will manifest itself like Lewy body or Parkinson's or Alzheimer's. Now, that 40-year-old plus, 30% of them, 0.1% of the 30% will end up getting prion disease. So there's a very high percentage of the 30% that are 40 years of age or older that is going to get ischemic dementia of some level. Some minor, where it's just recall of memory is a little difficult, to something much more severe, where you can't even wipe your butt. All right? And then you have 24.9% that will of the 30% that will end up getting amyloidosis, which is very similar to Alzheimer's. And then you're going to have a 0.1% that's going to get prion disease. Now, that's because of the aftershock. Now, why is it happening? It's about inflammation and poor blood flow. But if you can keep down that inflammation and you can increase that blood flow and strengthen the endothelial lining of your blood vessels, you're increasing the chances of not having a problem. So it's all about mitigation. All right. All right, what's next here? So make sure you go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the magnesium, boost up that brain function. All right, the healthier your neurons are and the better the microenvironment you create, and you bring down that inflammation, soak up those free radicals, you're reducing the probability of the misfolding of the proteins and having a problem. Because once the proteins are misfolded and they start to accumulate because of the high beta sheets, it's harder and harder to be able to break away those plaques. And that's the reason why Alzheimer's, once it gets too far down the road, it's hard to treat. Okay. I want to listen into CNBC talking about President Trump here.
Join us now. Looks like he swallowed a canary. Counselor, to the Treasury Secretary Joe Lavorgna, you might actually know things instead of just being conjecture. What you heard of this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, there are four great candidates. I mean, the street is very familiar with all four, and they'll all be very good. And Steve is exactly correct. The secretary has done a very thorough process and is going to give the president that list. He's given the president the list, and it's the president's decision at this point as to who he wants. And whoever is ultimately chosen, I think, will be very effective.
You know, you're going to walk this. You're not going to give any give us any idea of how you're going to. Let me ask you about Warsh, because you know in the past, I think some of the credibility that he's built up on Wall Street has been. I guess the perception that if he had to raise rates, he would raise rates like crazy. And I think he's been critical of the Fed and the recent policy moves and really how powerful the Fed has become, how transparent the Fed has decided to be. He thinks that how did he get back in the big graces?
Well, some of that stuff, Joe, is from a long time ago. And I think really in any of these instances, if the Fed needs to raise rates, they'll look at it holistically. The president wants somebody that's going to be sort of objective and look at this potential productivity boom based on his policies. You've got these supply side policies. Part of it's AI, but also, no tax, rather full expensing for capital expenditures. Now it's permanent, 100% expensing for factories. That's going to create a supply side boom. We're already seeing it in GDP data. We're going to see it more evidently next year. And the president wants somebody who's going to look at this holistically. And the secretary has given a lot of candidates, so I think objectively we'll look at the current situation as is, including Kevin Warsh.
Well, let's talk about the current situation. So you probably think rates could go lower, but at the same time, you probably think the economy is ready.
I think the economy is very healthy.
You think it's 5% next year, like what we're hearing?
Larry mentioned 5%. Look, I said to Steve earlier, if you look at the non-financial corporate productivity growth in the last 4 quarters, it's up 3.5%.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly we could have a real big boom next year, but you do need lower rates, so to speak, to grease the skids of more investment spending, especially in infrastructure as it relates to building factories and such.
But they run too hot.
I don't think they'll run too hot. No, I mean, if you look at inflation expectations, Joe, they're very stable. The yield curve is flat. President Trump was correct. Secretary Best was correct. The tariffs have not had the effect people thought they would. I've made that case myself. And, you need interest-sensitive activity to be stronger. There are pockets of the economy that are soft. And that's reflective of rates needing to come down. And inflation is a lagging indicator. So as you build productive capacity and you invest in CapEx, which is inherently disinflationary, you can have much lower rates and the economy reaches its full potential.
In your world, where are the manufacturing jobs? And in fact, this is in keeping with what they've been saying since day one about tariffs. They're saying a willy-nilly tariff assignment is causing companies to.
It's in automotive, it's in shipbuilding, it's in construction. There's, more home builders are starting to use 3D printing now in certain regions of the country, especially when it's warmer, a warmer region like New Mexico or Arizona. I don't think I've seen any 3D printing of homes in Michigan, but the point here is there's new technologies coming out, but the Defense Department says that that there are tons of jobs in shipbuilding, and these are jobs that are paying $100 grand or more. Now, the problem that I see here is that the youth that have gone to school, maybe ended up getting an accounting degree, or maybe some sort of humanities degree, maybe even something else, and they can't find work. Now sometimes they can't find work because they just want to stay in a certain region like New York, and New York doesn't have the jobs that they have skills or experience for, so they need to move, but they don't want to move. But the point here is that there are jobs that are starting to come online in the United States that can be filled by the youth to be able to start building up families, saving money, being able to pay down those student debts. They don't want to do it because they have this mentality that, oh, they're too good to actually work in a shipyard. Oh, they're too good to work in automotive. They're too good for this and too good for that. Oh, it's not New York, the land of the cultured. This is the problem that we have in society. We have a lot of people that aren't willing to do work. But I'll tell you, when you look at the bottom line, when you look at income, all right, when you're doing tax, when you're doing, a group in a society for taxes, you start to realize it's not the doctors and lawyers that are making all the money. Yeah, there are a few that are doing really, really well, but the average doctor is not making more than a plumber or an electrician that has their own job, that has their own company. The average electrician and plumber is taking home, especially if it's in the Midwest, $300,000 to $400,000 if they have their own company. Not if they, and part of the reason why is that they have workers that are working for them, and they're making money as the worker, the employee is making money, and the owner is making money on top of the employee. So there's a scalability that's going on. Doctor can't do scalability unless they own their own clinic. And most of them are selling out to private equity companies. So the average doctor makes less than an average plumber or electrician. And believe me, getting a medical degree takes a lot more education than getting something like an electrician or a plumber. But the thing is that our society needs more plumbers and more electricians. People that do. There's what's his name? Rowe? Is it Tim Rowe? The guy that did Dirty Jobs. But he has this. He does a podcast, and he's always talking. There's like millions of jobs that Americans don't want to do, that are high paying. Billions, millions, that are high paying. But yet you hear graduates coming out of college and they're saying they can't find a job. Well, you're not looking in the right place. And there's nothing wrong with getting your hands dirty and working up the ladder. Nothing wrong with that. And actually, that's the ethos of America. Most people that were successful, they got their hands dirty at the beginning and they worked up the ladder. Okay, they have an accounting degree. Why not? If you can't get a job in accounting, but you can get a job working at the shipyard, work at the shipyard, maybe you'll move up to the office level. Get in. And by getting into an industry, getting into a business, it opens up opportunities when they arise. You can capture them. No, the youth, this is a problem in the United States. So Joe from CNBC, who has a molecular biology degree but decided to work in finance, all right, he's having a hard time finding where's the jobs. But the dirty job guy, he's saying there's millions around. And he has a podcast talking about it all the time. I think it's Micro, that's his name, Micro.
They're not laying off people, but they're not hiring people because they're not sure what the future looks like, what the Supreme Court does, what happens with tariffs. You blame the manufacturing jobs.
Right. So let me just say, right, but Joe, if you look at the CapEx trend, in the first half of the year, CapEx grew nearly 15% in real terms. Ex the pandemic, that's the biggest increase since 2011, 2012. CapEx leads the hiring cycle. And what that will be manufacturing jobs. I do think it's coming. Now, what's interesting, this is important. In the one big beautiful bill the president got through in record time, that bill, 100% expensing for factories. The normal shelf life of a factory expenditure is nearly 40 years. You're going to be able to expense it fully in year one. And it's only going to go through 2028. The IRS is just finally putting the finishing touches on the guidelines for that. So next year should see a huge factory boom. And all the equipment that goes in it will also be 100% expense. So it takes a little bit of time.
That is perfect. That's the catalyst that is needed to reboot the manufacturing in the United States. Now, the manufacturing in the United States never went 100% away. There's still a lot of it there. All right, but it's nowhere in its glory days. All right. Now, what I noticed was right when NAFTA was passed. That's when I started seeing tool and die industry starting to decline in Michigan and moving to Canada. And the reason why was that they had cheaper labor and they had a currency that was weaker than the dollar. And so it was easier for Ford and GM to finance the tooling of automobiles and have it manufactured in Canada than in Michigan. And because Windsor, Canada is right across the river of Detroit, it was easy. It was easy to coordinate. But the problem is that if you keep on shipping your jobs overseas or to a neighboring country, you start to lose knowledge. You start to lose the know-how. And you have to be building something, not pushing paper. You have to be building something to have innovation. A society that doesn't build doesn't innovate. You can't just innovate through design. You learn technique, you learn something new about the manufacturing process, you learn something new about the behavior of the material you're working with. Accidental discoveries take place. That's innovation. And so when you ship it overseas, you lose that magic sauce of innovation. So bringing it back is super important. But you also have to have means of like going, okay, these machines that we need to get a CNC machine and it's 150 grand, but we don't want to depreciate it for over a 5-year period. Maybe we can depreciate it in 1 year, and that will help to offset the cost. That makes a lot of sense, especially when you're trying to reboot an economic cluster. Now, fast forward to, let's say, Flint, Michigan, when GM was in the heyday making a lot of cars in Flint, Michigan. And all of a sudden, GM was starting to sell less cars. They decided to pull out, close plants down. The tax revenue of the city started to go down. The municipality started to have problems with their water. Social services started to decline. and there was a white flight out of the city, and who was left? The poor. The economic cluster died. Why? Because GM was having problems with selling vehicles that came from those plants. People didn't want those cars anymore. They were making big cars, and everyone wanted a race burner from Japan. So GM was having a hard time adapting. So, it's not just shipping the jobs overseas, it's also realizing that you need to keep pace with the changing demands of your customer base. GM was late to the party. They thought that they could just make whatever they wanted. On top of, there was a little bit of a problem between management and GM and the United Auto Workers and the union. So it's a complex problem, especially in automotive. But to fix what is happening in the United States, we have to bring back manufacturing. And don't fall into the trap. Oh, people don't, people, if you bring the iPhone to Texas to manufacture, it's just going to have a bunch of people just sitting there and putting screws in. Guess what? There are very, very few screws in an iPhone. They're press fits. They're soldered. You have chips. The manufacturing of an iPhone is mostly automated. Mostly automated. But what's important, now, people like Joe on CNBC would say, well, that would mean that there's not that many jobs being created if it's automated. Wrong, 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 wrong. You have to build the assembly line. How many manufacturing engineers and assemblers take to do that? You need individuals at different stations or managing stations to make sure everything's working right. You need quality control engineers. You need the ones to program the robots. Oh, so it's higher skill manufacturing jobs. See, the day of putting in the screw is over. But the jobs in manufacturing are high paying. Now, I think Joe, the molecular biologist that decided to be a stockbroker and then end up being a host on CNBC, misses the big point here.
To start to become more evident. And again, lower rates will also help. Similar to the point the president made back in 2018 when he said, look, rates are too high, the Fed needs to cut. We saw the ISM survey soft, and then of course in 2019 had a boom. The economy grew nearly 3.5%. When
we were watching the Biden economy, and people were saying, well, Americans just don't understand how great it is. And the media was singing that too. I always point to the notion that real wages fell. That's why people...
Yeah, they were down about 14%.
Biden represented, and also Clinton, but we also saw it with the Bushes, right, unfortunately, the paper economy. The paper economy, the litigious economy, the Wall Street economy, the create the paper economy. But you import the goods that you need, and then you forget how to make them.
There's a reason they were negative. There's a reason people felt like crap because of that. Explain now why you're hearing so much about affordability when wages are rising faster than inflation.
So part of it is I do think the rate story, because look at first-time affordability fell to a record low under the prior administration. Rates at this point are a big driver of life.
These guys, they go around in circles, like a circle, in the 1990s, when NAFTA was implemented, and jobs were starting to leave, What was the affordability at that time, just before NAFTA? And that first few years of NAFTA, what was the affordability of homes? You could easily buy a really nice home, right, with getting a decent job. Nowadays, you can't do that. You have to save multiple years, and you gotta, have dual income, and you gotta have a perfect credit score, and still the bank doesn't want to give you any money. And it's getting to the point where it's so unaffordable, you have to do a 50-year mortgage, which is crazy for the person taking the mortgage. It's a moneymaker for the bank. The cost of education was so much less in 1998 versus now. So you got the cost of education, the cost of homes, healthcare is more expensive now. All of this is more expensive. And it's not just the normal inflation rate. If you took the cost of these things and just had it have an inflation adjusted calculation to 2025 from 1998, the cost of these homes, the cost of healthcare, the cost of education is far greater than the normal inflation rate. Even if you stepwised it in whatever that inflation was calculated for that year, not just averaging the inflation, but the real calculated inflation rate. There is a problem there. And part of the problem is when you are investing in assets like stocks go up faster than inflation. So the people that are not in stocks get farther behind. People in stocks get ahead on average. All right. This is the reason why that if you're part of the investor class, you're part of the uptrend of the K economy. If you're not invested in the stock market, you're on the downtrend of the K economy. You have Wall Street that's basically saying, how are you going to make more money so we can, increase your price per share? We'll give you a buy rating if you can increase your sales, or if you can cut costs, or increase your bottom line, or grow market share, or merge with another company. So there is this input from Wall Street to keep on pushing the price up above inflation to justify a high PE ratio. I mean, think about it. Should a company be trading 20 times earnings? When you buy a company on the private market, it's usually 2.5 times earnings. But in the stock market, you may be trading something as 20 times earnings, 15 times earnings, sometimes 30 times earnings. It's inflated. Yet, there's no real justification for it. And so when you increase the dollars from the Federal Reserve, the money's being printed from the Federal Reserve. It's not even printed anymore, it's just typed in a keyboard. When the digits start to increase and the money supply increases, where do you think that money's going? Where do you think that hot money's going? Most of it's going into the stock market to keep it going upward. It's not going into the hands of the individual for a transaction or into their credit card for transaction. The hot money is flowing in to the stock market and bolstering it up. And then that's the reason why when the Federal Reserve says we're going to actually raise rates instead of lower rates, Wall Street has a shit fit and starts selling because it's predicated on inflated money. Now we wonder why the middle class is is upset with the cost of things being so expensive. Now, think about it. Let's say you're the owner or you're the CEO of Toll Brothers or Pulte which is a major housing construction company. And they're on the public exchange. You want your stock to keep on going up. So what do? You buy some land instead of making 300 square feet homes, you're making 7,000 square feet homes. So you can charge more. Now think about it. Square footage is based on empty space. To build a home that's 3,000 square foot versus 7,000 square foot, the materials to build, it's more, but it's not double. It's not triple. Most of the home is empty space. But they charge per square footage, not the amount of material that is needed and the time to build it. Toll Brothers and Pulte are ripping you off. Why? Because they sell the unit, and that will justify a higher PE ratio for their stock. That's what's going on with new homes. Now, once you buy it, the average person that's going to sell, let's say years later, they're not going to sell it at a loss typically. They'll want to sell it at a profit, or at the very least, break even. So there's not enough homes out there for the average person to be able to enter. Now, back in the 90s, it wasn't impossible to buy a brand new home and be able to afford it if you had a decent job and you were in your late 20s. You can't do that today. Not even close. Most people, they would have to be 40 years old before they would be able to do that. Big problem. Big problem. So you have reduction in the economic clustering and the greed of a higher stock price that's really not justifiable, yet it's predicated on hot money from the Federal Reserve. And then people, they fall in the trap. Well, we'll just invest in Bitcoin and that's going to solve the problem. They don't realize that that's just a scam. You think the Federal Reserve is going to abrogate authority? You think the Treasury is going to abrogate authority to Bitcoin miners? Of course not. Every epoch in human history, if there was a problem with their Treasury, there was a war.
Ability for homes is low. In other words, you need to get rates down. But what's happening, Joe, and again, this comes to the forward, is if you look at the bill, as it's written, no tax on tips, and over time, that is going to further lead to huge increases in real after-tax income. And by the way, if you look at the blue-collar workers through November...
Now think about this. Now think about it in the context of what I just said. Do you think the average person that's working in the restaurant business as a waiter or a hostess of some sort, okay? Those jobs for people that were younger, that were trying to get some extra money for college or to get a little bit of extra money for the family. It wasn't a career. Unless you're at like a 5-star restaurant, and something like that for the affluent. But the average person, that was something that was for the younger crowd to be able to move up the ladder and build their life, all right? And yes, not being taxed on their tips means a lot to them because they're not making much money. But there is no way by no tax on tips fixes the housing crisis.
We are up 1.6% annualized. That is one of the biggest increases we've had in the last 60 years to start a new administration. So a lot of good things happening. Earlier you mentioned oil prices or gas prices being low. I mean, it's going to take some time, but the president clearly has put in place policies that benefit middle and lower income workers. We saw it in the first administration. The markets are reflective, I think, of a boom next year. You're seeing very tight credit spreads. You're seeing the bond market perform very well. The best performing market in the industrial world so far this year, and you're seeing the equity market perform well. I mean, that's just confidence in the policies. We just got to give it a little bit more time for everything to take hold.
Right, because I can give you a list. I mean, people point to 4.6% unemployment is the highest. That's still full of.
Well, no, and you've
that's
got
basically, and that's basically full
What's
of.
very low, Joe, what's important is you've got rising participation in a lot of the jobs.
2.7 on inflation, new highs in the stock market. I mean, it's not an economy where people should be saying, I'm miserable.
No, but the president really, though, is focused on working class Americans, middle and lower tax workers.
Another is that they're really worried about AI. People are worried, is their job stable? And then you have so many ghost jobs that are out there. You ask an average person that's just out of college, how many jobs did you apply? And it's in the hundreds. And they may have gotten 4 callbacks. And, have to go through, 4 different levels of interviewing to be able to maybe get a job. And it doesn't even pay that well. And then what about ones that are experienced in their 50s or 60s and they're looking? Let's say, heaven forbid, they were laid off and they're looking. They have the same problem. So the issue with job stability is barbelled. You got the problem with the ones that are getting out of college right now or high school that can't find work based on their discipline, and they aren't going to another region of the country where the jobs are that are blue collar. And then you have the experienced late 50s, early 60s. There's some downsizing that's taking place, and they're having a hard time finding work. And no one knows really what's going to happen with AI. I personally think it's going to decimate the job market. But maybe I'm a Chicken Little, and and the sky's falling. But I don't feel confident about AI. I think that there's some major problems in terms of the job market, but I also see the benefits of it. I can see on how AI can help drug discovery and help with disease treatment, improve people's learning. You can imagine not too far in the future, you can basically do it now, but not too far in the future, every student in the United States can have a customized AI tutor that would teach them like they were from Oxford. You wouldn't even need teachers anymore. You can basically learn anything now, anything. Nuclear physics all the way to something in the humanities. You want to be an expert at Latin, or you want to be a nuclear physicist, you could literally learn it on your own. As long as you had the discipline and you worked step by step and built up and built up and built up and built up. Most people don't have that discipline. But the AI can customize an education for you and provide what books you need to read, or what research articles you need to read, or where to get the online free materials. You can learn anything. That's very powerful. We got a school system that sucks, and we have a technology that will most likely make the student more educated. But we also, the dark side of this is that it can be used for weapon development, biological weapon development. It could be used for chemical weapon development. It could be used in the battlefield for warfare. Now, if if it's on your side, you want that to give you an advantage. But if you don't have the advantage and your enemy has it, it's a bad day on the battlefield. So there are pluses and minuses with AI. But when you look at just the typical job market, right at this moment in time, people are scared. They're scared. And I agree with Joe in the sense that it is really strange. I'm in my 50s, so I've seen a lot of America. I've seen a lot of the ups and downs, all right? And the thing is, this time period is different compared to other points in time where the stock market was up. There was more cheer in the stores. Oh, by the way, we don't have stores anymore because everyone's buying stuff online. But there is something not right. There should be more positiveness in the environment. Now, maybe it's because we're less social. We've become more negative because of the doom scrolling on social media. And this AI is really scaring people. You ask the average person, do you feel that AI is going to be a benefit to you or a hindrance financially in the next 5 years? And I'm willing to bet that 80% of the people out there are going to say they're worried. They're worried that the stability of their job. Now you got to think, a lot of them have mortgages, or they have credit card payments, or they have to put a kid through school. They have bills. How are they going to afford their life if they lose their job to AI?
Middle and lower income workers, and this is why they'll get substantial refunds next year. Gasoline prices should go lower. That's money in people's pockets. As rates come down, affordability goes up. I mean, this is really, it's breadth and depth of the president's policies that matter most.
Do you think we're going to grow out of the deficit? Is that your idea?
If we don't have growth, we're going to have nothing.
Can we raise taxes on the rich?
We need to have taxes in place that allow us to spend and create the economy that we want. The revenue share of GDP is over 17%. The problem has been on the spending side, and the spending numbers have slowed both in fiscal year and calendar year since the president took office.
But I think Andrew wants to.
And Joe, just on the tax front, I don't know if you saw that, we were talking about this Mitt Romney piece, not just about carried interest, but really at death, stepped up basis at death. He says it's got to go away. You can't do it this way. There's too much money that's being effectively lost in the system and creates too many perverse incentives where too many people of great wealth are able to effectively live off of loans their entire life for the rest of their life, so that they don't pay those taxes. Where do you stand on that? And at least from my vantage point, I don't think that would actually change the growth story.
Well, Andrew, again, as I was saying to Joe, I mean, we really have a revenue. We don't have a revenue problem. Revenues are actually very robust at over 17% of GDP. It's really on the spending side. If the economy, though, however, grows, Andrew, if we grow at 3%, which to me is very doable given the productivity trend and what we're starting to see on the labor market recovering, even at a 17% revenue share of GDP, we're going to raise about $4 trillion more money, I calculated some time ago, than what CBO was predicting, and that's a huge benefit to the longer term budget outlook. So on the tax side, I'm all for keeping taxes on labor and capital as low as possible to create the growth, to create the goods and services and industries and jobs that people want. And the other thing we have, Andrew, is the deregulation side is very powerful. This is going to get businesses growing and hiring and expanding. It's just going to take some time, but we are seeing the labor trend improve the last few months. And all the guideposts for 26 should suggest it should be a boom, as Secretary Besson said.
5%?
I would love 5%. 5% would be great.
I love 10%.
If you look at the street, there's many private sector forecasts, some very good private sector forecasters saying 3% real GDP growth. To me, that is very, very good.
We're used to
the first administration.
We must have been making a lot of mistakes for the past 30 years because we've been unable to get out of the. And we've been doing better than the rest of most of the, like Europe.
Well, a lot of the debt, though, Joe, was in the last administration, a huge increase in the debt.
And not the first administration.
No. Right after 9/11, we have been on a trajectory that's out of control in terms of printing money. Because it was 9/11 and the war in the Middle East. That was 20 years, and we didn't get anything out of it. You had Lehman in quantitative easing 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then you had COVID, the trifecta.
No, but we were growing almost 3% right in the first 3 years, or 3.5%.
We did do a little bit too much deficit spending, obviously.
Yep.
Well, not really, because if you look at the numbers, the TICJA, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, effectively paid for itself if you look at what the CBO spread out and what happened on the revenue side. And again, the spending, as I said earlier, is a bigger issue. But these things have been in the making for a while. President Trump's done a very good job, and at this point, the deficit numbers have looked a lot better.
If your industry is growing faster than the normal rate of inflation, and it is a already matured industry, there's something wrong. When housing and the cost of school and the cost of insurance medical insurance and private insurance and all that, everything. When it's way higher than inflation, there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Someone's taking advantage of someone. Or, you know, there's a deregulation, there's deregulations, or there's some sort of loophole, or there's too many regulations, whatever it is, but there's some manipulation that's taking place. It's not a free market.
Yeah, so I mean, it's going to take time, but we're moving in the right direction.
No, we're not. No, we're not. We need to make sure that we need to make sure that we have more jobs. That's what we need. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the complete multivitamin. This is the multivitamin that you need that's easy to digest, and it will help with enzymatic activity. It has the cofactors that you need to bind to those enzymes, change the conformation, and they will perform better within the cell. That means your metabolism will perform better, your tissues will perform better. This is a foundational part of my protocol to slow down the aging process. And the probiotic, this is the powdered probiotic, but you can also get the VeggieCap version on my store. And by taking a good probiotic, you're improving your absorption of your nutrients, you're reducing inflammation, you're improving your immune system at the gut level, you're improving your cellular metabolism, the communication to your liver, and also the communication to your brain. And when you're improving that communication between your gut and your brain, you're going to sleep better. You're going to be able to consolidate memory. You're going to be able to detoxify your central nervous system. Yeah, you actually detoxify your central nervous system when you have a good gut biome. You know why? Because you will be able to get into the 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep, because a good gut biome will help you to sleep. And you'll be able to consolidate memory. So your brain function will improve by having a good gut biome. Your skin will improve. Good health starts at the gut. Go to my store and get the probiotic. Now, stack it with the multivitamin, and that's the foundation to slow down the aging process. Now, another thing that you should get for the winter season is the structural nanosilver drops. You can get it in honey and lemon, blueberry, and also in cherry flavor. Very high quality drops. Take them right away when you have some sort of throat irritation. If someone around you is not feeling well, you might want to take them prophylactically, all right? And what this will do is it'll mitigate the issue because it's protecting your oral pharynx and your epithelial cells in your oral pharynx. Super important, right? And it has structural nanosilver. It's going to help to neutralize. Please go to my store. Get the structural nanosilver drops. And resveratrol. Resveratrol is something I've been taking for decades. It will help to soak up free radicals, improve the health of your mitochondria, allow for youthful gene expression, and get rid of cells that are in senescence. Take it every day. This stacks really well with C60. Resveratrol also helps the basal layer of your skin to improve the health of your skin. And that's the reason why you look younger when you take resveratrol. So please go to my store, get the resveratrol. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, let's listen into the Hill, the infighting within MAGA. Meanwhile, everyone is so worried about Tucker Carlson or Ben Shapiro or even Nick Fuentes, maybe even Candace Owens. Why should you care? Why? What literally is going on in their lives that is so important to move the ball forward for your life? And I guarantee the answer is nothing. Nothing. Nothing that Tucker Carlson says is that important. Nothing that Ben Shapiro says is that important. Nothing that Nick Fuentes says is that important. And nothing that Candace Owens says is that important. What is more important is your home cost, your cost for homes, housing. the cost of your food, the rate that is going up or down by the Federal Reserve, your job prospects. That's way more important. Your health is way more important than Tucker Carlson. From the Swanson family, or Ben Shapiro, or Candace Owens, or Nick Fuentes. They're all multimillionaires shoveling garbage in the cybersphere. Yeah, they're like coal. They're no different than coal shovelers during the steam engine days. Just shoveling coal into the steam engine to move it faster. That's what Tucker is. He's a coal shoveler, but it's not coal. It's innuendo, it's hate, it's garbage. Just shoveling garbage into the steam engine of the cybersphere.
Food security is national security. Phosphate powers America's farmers, but global competitors like Russia and China threaten to control our supply. Make phosphate a critical mineral and keep America secure.
Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. Amber, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. It's good to be back with you. It's been a minute.
I know. Are you in like holiday cheer or is it kind of like
getting there?
Yeah.
There's so much news happening that it feels like
I know.
Friday was crazy. It was like Friday morning, nothing happened, and then all of a sudden around 2 p.m., everything started dropping. We had like multiple congressional retirements. Elise Stefanik dropping out of the New York governor's race.
Yeah, that was a lot. That was a crazy news day. So hopefully we're winding into the holiday. But keep tuning in to Rising.
Yeah,
winding into the holidays.
We're going to get those last few stories out for you. So today on Rising, we're going to be discussing the partial Epstein files released over the weekend and how lawmakers are responding.
We'll also be talking about the United States Coast Guard reportedly pursuing a third oil tanker in waters near Venezuela.
But first, Lindsay, what's in your lens today?
Let's talk about it. So, if you spent the weekend avoiding political headlines, finishing your holiday shopping, or just protecting your peace, here's what you might have missed. Turning Point USA hosted its annual America Fest in Phoenix, drawing more than 30,000 attendees, and a who's who of conservative influencers, media figures, and politicians. Now, this event has been around since 2021, and it's always been loud, influential, and unified around one central enemy. That enemy usually is the quote-unquote woke left. But this year felt different. Yes, there were tons of viral moments. I mean, Nicki Minaj made a surprise appearance alongside Erica Kirk, took aim at California Governor Gavin Newsom, calling him New Scum, and affirmed her support for President Trump. Let's take a look.
I have the utmost respect and admiration for our president.
He even called the president handsome. That clip made headlines, but it wasn't the most revealing moment of the weekend. What stood out wasn't who conservatives were attacking across the aisle, it was who they were attacking on their own stage. For the first time, America Fest wasn't defined by a common foe. Instead, it became a public airing of sorts of grievances within the conservative movement itself. Some of the most powerful voices on the right spent their time accusing each other of being things like frauds, grifters, and worse. Ben Shapiro, co-founder of The Daily Wire, kicked it off Thursday with a blistering speech aimed squarely at figures like Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly. Take a look.
The conservative movement is also in danger from charlatans who claim to speak in the name of principle, but actually traffic in conspiracism and dishonesty, who offer nothing but bile and despair, who seek to undermine fundamental principles of conservatism by championing enervation and grievance. These people are frauds, they are grifters, and they do not deserve your time.
Less than an hour later, Tucker Carlson took the same stage, dismissed Shapiro's remarks, and told the crowd he watched the speech and, quote, laughed. The next night, the gloves fully came off. Steve Bannon didn't mince words, saying, quote, Ben Shapiro is like a cancer, and that cancer spreads. Megyn Kelly
They're all
followed, calling
cancer.
Shapiro a marginal figure and declaring their friendship is over. She said, quote, I resent that he thinks...
The reality is that they're all cancer. All of them. There's different types of cancer. You know? Leukemia, glioblastoma. There's all types of cancer. Melanoma. But all of them are cancer.
...to decide who must say what to whom and when. Vivek Ramaswamy, who was running for Ohio's Republican gubernatorial nomination, took aim at what he's called pockets of the, quote, online right during his address Friday night at the America Fest that fixated on heritage and lineage rather than American ideals. This wasn't ideological debate. This was an open power struggle over who gets to define the movement and who gets pushed out. Even the leadership acknowledged the cracks. In her opening remarks, Erica Kirk, Charlie Kirk's widow and Turning Point's new leader, warned of growing fractures inside the party and reflected on the aftermath of her husband's assassination.
He was assassinated. We saw infighting. We've seen fractures. We've seen bridges being burned that shouldn't be burnt.
Now, Axios reporter Mike Allen
Right now, anti-Semitism is louder than ever. So this year, your gift fights 3 times harder. 3 times the power to protect, to show up, and to be proud.
And here's the thing that they don't want to tell you. All right? Megyn Kelly, Tucker, Stephen Bannon, Ben Shapiro, and others, they're all jockeying for the viewership, for the ad revenue, because they're just podcasters now. But it's even more sinister, because if they get enough notoriety, the big funders from Connecticut that aligned themselves with the Trump train, the MAGA train, because there's an infighting that's going on with high net worth individuals in Connecticut, the Bushes and the Trumpers. And there's an infighting going on there. You sort of saw it during the primary of 2016 between Jeb Bush and Trump. Remember that scene where he said that all, these tickets were really for the Bushes? And how Bush Sr., was very negative to Trump? You ever wonder why? You think it was just policy? Don't be so stupid. It was about money. Big money. More money than you can ever dream of coming out of Connecticut. And there's an infighting that's going on between the Bushes, or the neocons, and this new type of Republican Party that will brand as MAGA. It's something a little different. And all of them are jockeying themselves to be able to be the next Turning Point like representative. Because Turning Point didn't just magically happen through some sort of, a network of schools and just organic growth. It was heavily funded by Connecticut. And you can't trust these people because they're all jockeying for that big money. Now, prove me wrong. You can't trust them. You can't trust them. And oh, by the way, the Israelis, Netanyahu, has aligned themselves with this big money from Connecticut. And this big money from Connecticut, some of it's Jewish, a lot of it's not.
Andrew Colbert, Charlie Kirk's friend, the executive producer of the show and the key architect of Turning Point USA under new CEO Erica Kirk why the organization allowed speakers to openly attack one another. Colbert explained the thinking, telling Axios, quote, "We don't tell speakers what to say. Charlie never did, and we don't either. Certain speakers felt the need to address these conflicts, then we trust that these issues were issues that needed to be aired in public." And maybe that's the point. America Fest didn't just showcase conservative star power, it exposed a movement wrestling with its own identity. The 4-day conference reflected deep divisions over what America First actually means and where the MAGA movement goes next, when it's held together by less by shared ideology and more by the gravitational pull of one man's personality.
Wrong. It's about the money from Connecticut, honey. It's that simple. See, another retard telling you that she thinks she understands what's really going on. It's all about the money. It's not about identity. Right, infighting? Yeah, they're infighting. They're infighting. But it's for the money. It's not about ideology. MAGA movement in danger. The infighting is happening between the neocons and the something else. Maybe it's America First. Something a little bit different. It's like Tea Party, but it's not. Is the Trump train really Republican? Kind of not. Identity crisis? No. The infighting's happening because they want to be on the pedestal, be the next Charlie Kirk that's getting funded by the Connecticut. But she can't tell you that. She can't see it. She doesn't understand. She's not smart enough to see it.
Person is Donald Trump. So I had a lot to say. I mean, there was a lot going on, but I know that was a long read because I wanted to recap everybody, not just give my perspective. But what did you think about the event? Because a lot of people are describing it as chaotic, and I was trying to be as fair as I could. But
No, it was a fair read of everything that happened. There were a lot of people in the conservative movement. I can tell you in group chats talking about how we were sitting down with the popcorn, just like watching it all unfold. Starting with the Ben Shapiro speech, which was like the first shots fired, right?
And it was the first day.
Yeah, and he was waving and saying,
and they know what the dynamics of people are. They understand. Create hate within some group, and there's going to be a soap opera. It's going to be Jerry Springer, maybe even have some chairs thrown at each other, and everyone's going to go to their podcast and watch it. Meanwhile, we're marching to war in the Pacific. Meanwhile, your jobs are being eliminated by AI. Meanwhile, your health is declining in the aftershock of 2020. Now, what's more important to pay attention to? The soap opera or your health? Let's continue on with the soap opera.
I tuned in specifically to hear Tucker's response, wondering if he was going to throw those blows back at Ben Shapiro, and he was a little more subtle. But one thing he did say, which he's kind of declined to do until now, because Tucker's the kind of person where if like someone accuses him of something, he's like, whatever, I'm not engaging with you, like I'm not doing that game. But he gave this forceful condemnation of anti-Semitism, and he got into what he believes is the sort of backbone of conservative principles coming from Christian morality. So he talked about, I'm not anti-Semitic because Ben Shapiro says I have to be, or because of the current political times. I'm not anti-Semitic because my Christian values tell me that every human is created equal. And what he found so objectionable about Ben Shapiro sort of trying to gatekeep speech is that the reason why free speech matters is because human beings aren't slaves. You don't get to tell other people what to do, what to think, and what they can say. And so it was kind of getting at the heart of the issue without expressly calling out Ben Shapiro by name or even insulting him personally. So it's kind of a smart way to springboard those accusations into a broader discussion of what conservative principles are and what they mean and where they come from. So I think it wasn't as bad maybe as it seemed on the surface, the infighting on stage. But then the next day you had Steve Bannon and Megyn Kelly, and
it goes back to God, country, and family. You want conservative principles? You have to have some sort of spirituality in your life or some sort of ethics, some strong ethical foundation, spirituality, God. Country. Have an affinity for your country and have an affinity for family and the family unit and the importance of the family. That's right there. All you got to do is focus on those three things and it goes a long way. Long way. No, we won't focus on those. We'll focus on the money coming from Connecticut.
Things got messy again. So when I think about the audience, $30,000.
$30,000. What?
So when I think about the audience, $30,000, 30,000 people is not a small thing. Right. So when you have the audience that obviously wants to come hear a variety of speakers, where does the audience mostly land? Like when you're looking at MAGA and what's happening in the party, like people are not, I don't think, over-reporting the fractures. And mind you, there's plenty in the Democratic Party, but I can't say they're over-reporting watching what happened with Marjorie Taylor Greene and the conflict between whether we should continue to support Israel in the way that we do. There's so much happening. So like, where does the 30,000 stand? Turning Point has the hearts, ears, and minds of millions of young people. Where are young people feeling? That's what the organization was targeting about all these leaders that spoke.
Yeah, and that was what was so interesting watching these different speeches is
they don't care.
Cheers for everybody, right?
They don't care.
Even people who were on
They're
different
going
sides of this sort
after
of ideological battle over things.
No. She's missing the point. You go after the youth because they can get hoodwinked into this hate division. And they'll watch both and they think it'll be all funny. But the people that are speaking and creating the hate, they don't care about the kids. They don't care about the youth. They don't care about their problems. They care about their viewership, their ad revenue, and the money from Connecticut.
What America First means, and so it wasn't super clear who won. And that's going to be a defining part of figuring out where the movement goes post-Trump. And I think what this really tells you, though, is that people are already treating Trump like he's a lame duck president, and we're still a year out from the midterms, right? They are already trying to figure out who is going to win this power struggle for the post-Trump Republican Party, which ideology is going to win out, and the president wasn't really a fixture of conversation the way that he might have been in previous years.
Yeah, in previous years, he literally was on the stage, right? And so it was a big deal. That's the biggest thing, and I know we'll keep talking about this, but what does the party look like? And we're going to talk about J.D. Vance after President Trump, but like nobody really can say that. We have so much time between now and the next presidential election, and I know it goes by quick, but between the waning support that we're seeing with the poll numbers for President Trump and just the overall ideological divides that are happening within the party, like it kind of seems to me like it's more up for grabs than people thought maybe even a few months ago.
I think so too. This is the kind of thing you normally see in the final 6 months of the presidency. We're only a year in.
We got a lot to talk about. Next on Rising, the Department of Justice released hundreds of thousands of documents on Friday that are part of the Epstein files. But since then, at least 16 files have disappeared from the DOJ website. We'll be right
All right. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. This will help to detoxify your body, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase. And when you do that, you're improving your cardiovascular health, your brain function, your immune system, and your endocrine system. You're slowing down the aging process. And you'll also recover quicker after a workout and help with joint health. So this is a very, very powerful micronutrient barley. This is a month's supply. It's a powder. You mix it with soft foods like hummus or yogurt or even applesauce. You can mix it with water or with milk or even a smoothie, but take it every day to slow down the aging process and to target these different systems that I just mentioned. Another supplement to help with the cardiovascular health is Omega-3. Omega-3 will help to control your lipid profile, help to bring down LDL levels and increase your HDL levels, bring down inflammation, and help to prevent red blood cells from overclotting. The supplement Omega-3 is super important to take every day, all right? So please improve your cardiovascular health by taking Omega-3 and do some resistance training and cardio. You want about a 65-30-35 split, 65% in resistance training and about 35% in cardio. Now, the deodorants that I have are dual purpose. It's for males and females. They're made from essential oils from the Himalayas, has no aluminum, no baking soda. They help to detoxify your body. And when you detoxify your body, you're improving your immune system and your endocrine system, and you're using it as a daily deodorant. It's made from essential oils from the Himalayas. You can get it in peppermint, lavender, and tea tree, and in citrus. Again, it's for males and females. It's a deodorant that has a dual purpose. Use it as a daily deodorant, but it will help to detoxify your body. And vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 has is a cofactor for gene expression. So D3 will help to express your genes, so your cells perform properly. Now, vitamin D3 will also help to absorb calcium, and if you do resistance training, it's going to help to build denser bone. This is super important to slow down the aging process, because as you get older, your bone density starts to decline, and you don't want osteopenia or osteoporosis. So take vitamin D3 every day. In addition, vitamin D3 will also help to get cells to go into apoptosis if they're infected. This is really important to take during the winter season. So please go to my store, use discount 5. You get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. All right, let's listen into all right, the S&P 500 is now trading at 6,873. I still have a target year end at 6,850. So it's a little bit above my target, but as we get closer to the end of the year, I think it's just a harmonic dissipation. Now, there may be a spike. We may have what they call a Santa Claus rally. Maybe. I doubt it. All right, let's listen into Mark Levin. Mark Levin is another clown, but let's listen. It's all these conservatives, even ultra liberals, but there is this infighting that's taking place. And the Republican Party, because of this infighting, we could lose seats in the House because of it.
Hey, finance the rampway.
Perfect timing.
CARE, Hamas, all these entities, these radical terrorist organizations. We saw the horrors that took place in Australia, the horrors that are taking place in Africa, the horrors that are taking place in the Middle East, October 7th, and the horrors that are taking place in the United States of America. I get the sense, Zudi Jasser, that what you refer to as political Islam, or what they refer to as jihadi Islamists, they're here in our country now, aren't they?
You cannot overstate the threat, Mark. And, we've been talking about it for decades, since 9/11, as a whack-a-mole program, and it's no longer a whack-a-mole. This is a sonic boom that we saw over the last week between all of the different threats. And Israel and the Jewish community have been at the head of that spear. Why? Because the radicals divide the world into the land of Islam and the land of war. The rest is war. So the West, be it Australia, Israel, Europe, or America, is to them the land of war. And they're so-called lone wolves. They're not lone. This is not even a pack of wolves. This is battalions of wolves that are in our country, in our borders, and this is a domestic and global battle. And as you so poignantly pointed out, we're 250 years into an experiment in American liberty that is the greatest democracy on the planet, that was founded on battling theocracy. And I, as a Muslim, my family came to this country because they could be more free here than in any so-called Muslim majority country that is all run by an establishment of theocrats, of petro-Islamists from Qatar to every other dictatorship in the Middle East. And they're radicalizing their community by having a supremacism that Islamic law should reign, and it's not about individual rights and freedom. And either we come to task with the battle before us. We've declared war on Nazism, communism, and we had the clarity and the moral courage, as you laid out, to fight those ideas. And when we finally had resolve, when we took an offense ideologically, we defeated communism without firing a bullet against them. Political Islam, Islamist theocracy, is at the same stage. And either we come to task with the battle or we're going to crumble. And the Jewish community has been at the head of that spear, and we need to support them, and we need to support our freedoms.
Very well said, Zuni Jasser. Let me ask you this. Am I right that the Democrat Party has essentially been devoured by this radical movement? And I'm not talking about the reform movement. I'm talking about the radical element. And then we have sort of these neo-fascists who are trying to either...
Well, you have also the ultra-right that hates Jews, too. They, so you have the ultra-left that is bought into the Islamic ideology. They've been captured. I think there's a term called apologetic suicide. I had to look it up. By Gad. But there's also the ultra-right, where they hate Jews so much that they are so far right that they end up being far left. And it's like a big circle, They go so far right, they end up being an ultra-left individual. Nick Fuentes is a classic example.
Republican Party, or cripple the Republican Party, who in many ways sounds similar to these Marxist Islamists on the left.
As I testified to Congress repeatedly, I said, listen, if you think this is just a Muslim problem, you're going to find yourself surrounded by other enemies that the Islamists are going to bring to their side. So when Qatar fuels the radicalization of people across the country in funding liberal, leftist, progressive university teachings, and then all of a sudden you find this Marxist, jihadist candidates in New York City like Mamdani and others, it's not a coincidence because they demonize America. They use wokeism to infuse this cancerous ideology, and that wokeism infiltrates not only the left, but as you point out, is infiltrating our own party and our own conservative movement, and we need to fight against it because true liberty, true American ideology against theocracy cannot be relegated to identity politics. It's about meritocracy, and the left was radicalized and is radicalized, and all of a sudden our kids and their friends are looking at America as the enemy, when in fact my children are taught that America is a shiny city on the hill and we need to defend it. And this is how we win wars, is by naming the enemy, which is Marxist jihadism, and not being weak and withering behind identity politics.
Very well said. When we return, look, I know what the Democrat leaders are like. You got Bernie Sanders, you have this mass slaughter in Australia, he blames Netanyahu. That's how sick that guy is. I mean, utterly off the edge of the earth. But are you concerned that not enough Republican leaders are speaking out? A few of them are. But I really think they should be speaking out so loudly that it's deafening at this point. Because if the Republican Party doesn't stop this, or the conservative movement doesn't stop this, it's not going to be stopped.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News.
Who needs to stop it is the middle ground. Middle America. Not too far right, not too far left. The Goldilocks zone of politics. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Burley. This will help. This show is totally unscripted. Right? So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Gladiator Burley. What this will do is help to build strength, help to bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals through superoxide dismutase, and to detoxify your body. When you're bringing down that inflammation and detoxifying your body, soaking up those free radicals, you're helping your immune system and your endocrine system. You're going to be recovering quicker after a workout. You're going to help with brain function because you're bringing down inflammation at the cerebral level. And if you do resistance training, this is going to help you to build muscle, right? It's really important. Why? Because by building muscle, you're actually going to move around more. You're going to have more vitality. And when you get into your geriatric years, you're going to have denser bone, more muscle mass, and increase your chances of longer survival. All right? You start looking at people that are starting to age, they start to atrophy, right? You don't want that. In addition, make sure that you work out your back muscles. And the reason why is it's going to improve your posture. And these different layers of musculature in your back, you have deeper muscles that surround the spinal cord, and then you have muscles that are attached to your rib cage, and then your scapula. You know, when you build up your muscles at these different layers, you're actually improving your posture, and you're going to have better lymphatic flow, so your immune system will perform better, and you're going to have more venous return flow to your heart. And that will help with your cardiovascular health and get better circulation. In addition, by building up your back muscles through resistance training, you're also improving the density of your vertebrae, and you're building up that musculature that will help to reduce stress between vertebrae. I had a question in the chat about discs, compression of discs, bulging of the disc. You want to reduce that compression. Well, you can reduce that compression by having a better posture. Now, you don't want to wait until you have a slipped disc, right? Or degenerative discs. What you want is to be able to build up that musculature before you start having a problem. So you're reducing the chances of having back problems when you're older. See, if you pay attention to people that are, start getting into their late 40s, 50s, 60s, and a lot of times they pull their back out. Well, you got to build up the muscles in the back. It's better to do it before you start having problems. You got to start slow, but you can do it. And you'll get added benefits. Denser bone, better posture, better lymphatic flow, and better venous return flow. So please take my advice and build those back muscles. Super important. So get the gladiator barley, do some resistance training, slow down the aging process. And Myotrol. Myotrol is perfect to help with the gene expression to build muscle. It has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to be able to help with the gene expression to build muscle and maintain it. When you turn age 40, you start to decline in the actual gene expression for building muscle. Now, over time, you start to atrophy. You start losing muscle. This is the reason why you have to do proper supplementation, proper diet and exercise to be able to maintain and build muscle. Now, get the Myotrol. This will also help to improve the health of your mitochondria so you have the energy to maintain the muscle. It stacks really well with gladiator barley to help build muscle. You can take them separately, but I recommend taking it together. And if you're an athlete, you'll benefit from this too. It's not just for people that are older. If you're an athlete, take the gladiator barley and the Myotrol, and this will help with the strength for your sport. If this was around when I was doing my triathlons in my 20s and 30s, I would have taken this as a pre-workout fuel source. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, get the Myotrol, gladiator barley, use discount 5, you get $5 off any order, and slow down the aging process and get healthy, all right? Don't be one of those individuals that it's like, they start having lots of back problems and it's just a downward spiral. Now, if you do have a back problem, you got to be very careful and you try to build up that muscle. And you do the proper supplementation, and hopefully you don't need surgery if you have a problem with your discs. But sometimes, especially bulge discs, you might have to have surgery to reduce that compression on the nerve. So, but it's better to have a muscular back before you start having problems. Another thing is weight control. Controlling your weight, your calorie intake is super important. There is a correlation between people having back problems and people that are overweight. Now, it doesn't mean that it only happens to people that are overweight, because you can have a back problem and be at a proper weight. But a lot of times, especially when you get older, back problems start to become more prevalent with people that are overweight. So weight control is super important.
President Trump launching a massive airstrike on more than 70 terror targets in Syria. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth called it a declaration of vengeance meant to eliminate ISIS. Joining me now, retired four-star General Jack Keane. And General, look, this was retaliation for the deadly attack on U.S. forces in Syria. Do you support this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very comprehensive but nonetheless limited attack, on ISIS in Syria. I mean, clearly it doesn't reflect that this organization is somehow recovering and is a major threat to the United States. If the caliphate was taken away from them in 2019 by the Trump administration that existed in Syria and also in Iraq, and we've kept a small, modest force there, along with the Syrian Kurds and the Syrian Arabs, to make certain that the organization did not grow and expand and become a threat again. And that operation has been successful. This is more a reflection of a single individual who was a part of the Syrian security forces, who was inspired by ISIS. They suspected him of his radical views and were about to remove him as a security force member when this attack took place. It's more of a reflection of ISIS inspiring somebody than it is of this organization growing in size and becoming a threat to the United States. The retaliation attack is appropriate to send a clear message to them and to the members of this organization that they're in danger if they move towards hurting the United States again.
All right, next one for you, General. The U.S. now pursuing a third so-called dark fleet oil tanker near Venezuela. An official telling Fox that it's trying to evade authorities by, quote, flying a false flag and under a judicial seizure order. Has there been any response from Maduro that you know of?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, this is all a pressure campaign, beginning with the demonstration of military force in the region, shutting down the narco trafficking at sea, and beginning to take away the major revenue source that Maduro and Venezuela so depends on, the sale of oil. So here we are, we're seizing ships that are coming out of Venezuela and stopping ships from going into Venezuela. And a lot of them, frankly, Ashley, are turning around and not going near Venezuela as a result of it. So that's already starting to have some effect. I applaud the administration here. They're demonstrating some patience and also some persistence here. This is about forcing Maduro to voluntarily resign and leave and take the exit that President Trump has offered him, or to have the people around him who lose confidence in the fact that why are we putting up with Maduro and have all this grief brought on us and pushing him out. That is a much better option than the other options that are available, certainly the use of force. But I do believe those options are on the table as well.
Very good. Another one for you, General. White House envoy Steve Witkoff and Ukraine's President Zelensky says they held constructive talks in Florida this weekend. Do you think we're going to see any meaningful progress with Russia before the end of the year? Or going into the new year, I guess. I mean, where's the state of play on this?
Well, again, President Trump here has been really persistent in attempting to achieve a peace And I applaud his team for working so hard at this. They use the term constructive. I mean, that's diplomatic speak for progress, but things are yet to be resolved. And that's where we are. There's three pieces to this. The 20-point plan that was discussed in Geneva a few weeks ago. The issue there is territory, and are they willing to swap territory? The second issue, and this is critical to the first one, and that's security guarantees. And that's U.S. commanding a multinational force, an air, land, and sea component to that force to make certain that Putin does not reattack. And the third piece of it is economic. It's about the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine itself. In all three of those, there's unresolved issues. So it's a work in progress. Whether we can get something done by the end of the holidays remains to be seen. Give them credit for sticking with this. Listen, my concern here has always been Russia. Ukraine wants peace. The United States wants peace. Russia has been voting for war by their actions time and time again. That has been where they are. It remains to be seen if they have changed.
Last one for you, General. Senator Lindsey Graham has a warning about Hamas. Listen to this, I'll get your comment.
Hamas is not disarming, they're rearming. Hamas is not abandoning power, they're consolidating power. That's what the military intelligence people in Israel told me. That's what the IDF told me. That's what our own people told me. So I would urge President Trump to meet with Prime Minister Bibi next week and come up with a plan, put Hamas on a...
This means that we're going to have more war in the Middle East in 2026.
Time clock. If they don't turn over their weapons and stop rearming at a date certain, I would unleash Israel on them.
So, General, is Hamas trying to rebuild their ranks, and can they?
Yeah, well, certainly they're doing everything they can to do that. There's about 5,000 of them left. A lot of them are teenagers that they recruited, to be sure. They still have some seasoned fighters there. And yes, they want to rearm, they want to re-equip, they want to stay in power. That's a fact. President Trump said the last time that President Netanyahu was in the White House, even though they were announcing, remember, the 22-point deal, they said if Hamas doesn't it doesn't disarm, and demilitarize, then certainly we would support Prime Minister Netanyahu going in there to finish it. The diplomatic effort is underway. I don't think anyone's going to stop that effort for the time being to see if it can work. All the signs are that there's not going to be a country that's willing to step up and disarm Hamas, given the fact that they're unwilling to do so. So I think down the road here, certainly, Prime Minister Netanyahu should be given a green light. He'll certainly want that at a time of his choosing to be able to go in there and finish the job once and for all. The good news is right now, so our viewers understand, Hamas does not have the capability right now to seriously attack Israel in any way, shape, or form. That just doesn't exist. So that is a good thing. But we don't want them to get that capability once again.
Exactly. We'll leave it there. General Jack.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Clarity Factor. Clarity Factor will get rid of that brain fog and allow you to concentrate on tasks. Over time, what will happen is that you'll have positive neuroplasticity, you'll be thinking faster, and you'll have better memory. Take this every day. This is a very powerful neurostack. Take it every day, improve your brain function. Good Night Formula has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. It'll allow you to get into 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep. That will allow you to detoxify your central nervous system, consolidate memory, and to be well rested. You will age slower by having better sleep. Please go to my store and get the Good Night Formula. And to help the health of your pancreas, take the digestive enzyme complex. This will help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, reduce the stress on your pancreas, and allow you to absorb your nutrients with less stress on your digestive system. This has bromelain in it. It'll also help to break up clots, and it has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins. This is the reason why it's so important to take it during the winter season, because you want to break up those glycoproteins. Trust me. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, Get the digestive enzyme complex. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. Now let's go to Fox about the Minnesota welfare fraud.
Flinging like Tim Walz. Well, we're learning new details about the magnitude of Minnesota's massive welfare fraud. Federal authorities say a total over $9 billion.
Fraud is not small. It isn't isolated. The magnitude cannot be overstated. What we see in Minnesota is not a handful of bad actors committing crimes. It's a staggering industrial scale fraud.
Yeah. Brought to you by the Democratic Party.
It's swamping Minnesota and calling into question everything we know about our state.
Yep.
But Tim Walz and his administration are pushing back, saying there was only a little bit of fraud.
What you're seeing here is you're seeing the weaponization. We'll continue to fix it. They're going to continue to come up with numbers that don't have it there, and it's sensationalized. I don't expect anything different from this administration.
The evidence that we have indicates tens of millions of dollars in fraud. There isn't a final number at this point, but we don't have evidence to suggest that level of fraud or a $9 billion number.
But Governor Walz can't hide from this story, as House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer is investigating the scandal and is determined to uncover the truth.
He's going to have to answer questions about the billions, not millions, not hundreds of millions, billions of dollars of fraud that we see wasted in Minnesota. And the fact that, according to state whistleblowers, state employees in Minnesota.
You ever wonder why they don't want to get the dead people off of the voter rolls? Well, if you send a check to a dead person, a live Democrat could cash it.
Most of whom are Democrats. They allege that they alerted both Governor Walz and Attorney General Keith Ellison about this fraud, and they did nothing about it because they didn't want to offend that massive Somali population.
Guy, this to me, if there was ever an investigation to be had, and Republicans were ever going to take time to investigate anything, I would say this would probably be it.
Yep.
And I don't think Minnesota is where it should stop. I think Minnesota is where it should start, because I have a feeling many other states we could probably uncover some billions with the B. But I know you and I both saw a tweet about this, about just massive welfare fraud in general and SNAP fraud. I mean, it just expands a lot of different categories, right? But if you break down the numbers, I think we saw a real staggering one about how much money we're actually being robbed of in this country.
Yeah, I mean, you can go through any of the numbers, actually. Starting just in Minnesota, it seems like what we're hearing from the governor there is, oh, the Republicans are making up numbers. No, this was a federal prosecutor after a very in-depth, substantial investigation into what he called industrial scale fraud in the state of Minnesota, all presided over by Governor Tim Walz. And out of one side of his mouth, Walz is trying to say, like, oh, we're going to fix it and it's bad. Out of the other side of his mouth, he's like, well, it's only not that much. It's only tens of millions, according to his little minion there. And that means they are not ever going to be serious about this. They are perfectly comfortable with their taxpayers being robbed blind for political and identity reasons. And he just wants to get reelected next year. So he wants to pretend like this is some sort of GOP witch hunt, when in fact, the prosecutor in this case, and we saw a bit in that clip from him, I just want to read one more quote from him, talking about why it is especially bad in Minnesota. Quote, Minnesota has become a magnet for fraud, so much so that we have developed a fraud tourism industry. People coming to our state purely to exploit and defraud its programs. This is a deeply unsettling reality all Minnesotans should understand. It is so bad in Minnesota that people from around the world, it seems, are traveling there to steal from taxpayers, and that's the response we're seeing from the governor. It's pathetic.
You know, Joey, we invite the third world, and in return, they rob us blind. But that's such a nice, generous gift they've given back to us. I mean, Tim Walz made a big thing about, don't say it's the Somalis, but when you look at the fraud, it was done by the Somali population. So he wants to make it about race. He wants to make it about identity. The mayor there wants to eat Somali food and almost throw up and say, I love the Somalis. But I don't think they're understanding that we don't care because it's their race or their religion. We care because it's a group of people who are doing it. And to Guy's point, apparently they're doing it in a well-organized way, and they targeted the state for it.
Yeah, I don't care about their race. I do care about their country of origin. I mean, Rob O'Neill, if you don't know who he is the man who shot Bin Laden. He put the book out. But before that, or after that, I'm not sure, he also was on the team that saved Captain Phillips. And he posted on X today, yeah, the Somalis are world famous for being pirates. Of course, they came here to steal and defraud us. He's like, it's a part of their culture. I don't know how you call that racist. If it's true, it's true. I mean, I don't have to go back to Mogadishu to see these problems. But I will say this when it comes to what's being said, is never snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. If it's a $1 billion scam, that's huge. If it's a $500 million scam, that's huge. I hope Joe Thompson knows exactly what he's talking about when he uses the $9 billion number, because I don't want Tim Walz and Democrats to have an argument at all to go back to the voters and deceive them with it. Well, they're blowing it out of proportion. It's not that big of a deal. So I hope when he says $9 billion, he's got the paperwork to prove it, because I don't want them to give them room to have a rebuttal, because this is egregious. Just so overtly egregious.
It's bad. Yeah, and to Joey's point, the question is how quickly can they prosecute these cases, and that's going to rack up the honest total when it all gets to the end of it. And these cases can be hard to prosecute and to prove and to chase down money trails. The House Oversight Committee in this letter to Keith Ellison, the prosecutor here in this case, they make the argument that the state essentially knew that this fraud was happening and allowed it to occur. In this letter, it says a June 2024 report from the Minnesota Department of Education found that the threat of litigation and negative press from providers engaged in the fraud schemes affected how state officials use their regulatory power. A former fraud investigator in the Attorney General's office said that state regulators, especially those in the Democratic administration, were reluctant to take action in response to the allegations involving the Somali community. So there were concerns. So the government protecting itself is the allegation.
They didn't want to be called a name in the local or national press.
Yeah.
So they allowed their taxpayers and all of us to be robbed blind. What a Christmas tale.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and help support the channel by getting the great products that I offer. Use discount 5, you get $5 off any order. If you spend $100 or more, you get a free gift until supplies last. And if you follow what I take on a regular basis, you're going to slow down the aging process. It works. You just have to have the diligence and the willingness to follow the advice. Get the lignans. Lignans will soak up free radicals, bring down inflammation, help with your immune system and your endocrine system and your cardiovascular system. By bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals, you're reducing plaque formation. Super important. Boost up that immune system. And turmeric helps to bring down inflammation and soaks up free radicals. By doing that, you're helping your immune system and your cardiovascular system. Stack them together to get a synergistic effect to help with your cardiovascular system and your immune system. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. All right, let's listen into Bloomberg.
Understands how essential Greenland is to our national security. Presumably, Governor Landry read this on Truth Social and then issued his own statement saying, this in no way affects my position as governor of Louisiana.
Right.
Are we playing around here? Is this just something to distract us from another thing, or are we actually going to annex Greenland?
I don't really believe very often in the distract us from another thing narrative on a lot of these. I think what you're seeing, though, is an administration, when Trump came back into office, there was a lot of talk about Greenland. It was really in the news. There was a lot of tension with Denmark. J.D. Vance went there. Then it kind of faded away, and we all thought, and a lot of Republicans who were very uneasy with the president's desire to annex Greenland and Panama Canal were, I think, sort of relieved that this had faded from the headlines. But what we're seeing here really is an indication that President Trump has not forgotten about Greenland. He wants Greenland. and he's going to keep pressuring this issue. So where this decision came from at this particular moment, we haven't figured it out yet, but what you can be sure of is that despite the unease, the feeling of queasiness among Republicans about this, the president has not forgotten is going to keep pushing this issue.
So I was actually in Greenland not too long ago, and they have. There's a new breaking news. There's a new direct flight from Newark. You can fly 4 hours Newark to Greenland. It's amazing. So they're getting the first batch of American tourists. And they told me, first of all, the first couple of planes did have a lot of MAGA folks who came off the plane with red hats and were walking around looking like they were picking out places to live. So now when you walk downtown in Greenland, they have shirts that essentially say Greenland for Greenlanders and a lot of like anti-Trump posters.
Yeah.
But the irony is they said they would have liked the economic interest from the U.S., just maybe not at this level of takeover.
I think the level of intensity has made a lot of people very uncomfortable.
The EU weighed in on this, by the way, saying that it stands in full solidarity with Denmark and Greenland. So add this to the list of conversations.
Right, and what Landry will do as the envoy is very much unclear. We've seen the president propose a lot of these envoys in the past, and then their job description is very unclear. So a lot of questions.
The governor will never buy a drink in Greenland. That's right. Assume right now, if he's confirmed. I don't think that's a confirmed position. Nick, thank you so much. Great to see Nick Wadham.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Boomer Boost. Boomer Boost has 68 nutrients. It has a very comprehensive compound profile shown. This will slow down the aging process. It will help with your brain function, your cardiovascular system, your musculature, your energy levels, your metabolism will rev up. You will feel the effects of this within 72 hours. This is a month supply. It's a powder. You mix it with soft foods, filtered water, a smoothie, or even with milk. I mix it with hummus every day. But take it every day. And within 72 hours, you're going to have a steady burn of energy, no spiking. You're going to increase your vitality. You're going to be very active. You're going to be more active. And by being more active and having a better metabolism, you're going to lose weight. You're going to have better musculature. And again, like I said, you're going to improve your brain function. You're going to notice that you're getting rid of that brain fog. You're going to be able to sleep better. You're going to be able to concentrate. Your memory will improve. You'll just be more energetic. Please go to my store, get this. This is very important. It's a cornerstone of the anti-aging protocol. What's the anti-aging protocol? It's really simple. The multivitamin and the probiotic are the foundation. The first pillar on top of that foundation, Max 35 or cleanse to boost up the immune system. C60 is the second pillar to soak up free radicals. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. The third pillar, turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans to boost up the immune system and help with the cardiovascular system. And Boomer Boost to rev up your metabolism and your energy levels. Please go to my store and get the Boomer Boost. And lastly, C60. C60, you can get it in avocado oil, extra virgin olive oil, and MCT coconut oil. You can get it in a 2 ounce, a 4 ounce, or an 8 ounce configuration. It's cheaper per ounce at a higher ounce configuration. Take a teaspoon a day every day. This is going to soak up free radicals. It's 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. And at the cellular and tissue level, it's going to bring down inflammation and soak up those free radicals. The tissues and the cells will perform better. You're going to have more energy because the mitochondria is going to be healthier. So you're going to have more ATP. The cells are going to perform better. Your tissues are going to perform better. Your immune system and your endocrine system will perform better. Your brain function will improve. Over time, you're going to have positive neuroplasticity. You're going to be thinking faster, and you're going to have better memory. Why? By soaking up free radicals and reducing stress at the neuron level, what's going to happen is the neurons are going to produce neurotransmitters. It's going to have the energy that it needs because the mitochondria is healthier. And the communication between the neurons are going to improve, so the dendritic connections will improve. At the vascular level, you're going to be soaking up those free radicals and preventing oxidized LDL. Well, when you do that, you don't have plaque buildup. And at the basal layer of your skin, by improving the basal layer, your skin improves. You will feel the effects of this within 2 months. Take it every day, a teaspoon a day. I've been taking C60 every day since 2016. So at the basal layer, what's going to happen is you're soaking up those free radicals and improving the basal layer. Your skin's going to improve, and it stacks really well with resveratrol. Resveratrol also helps the basal layer. If you take this every day for a year, you will look younger. Take a before and after picture and take a teaspoon a day every day, and you will look younger. And you stack it with some of the other supplements that I just mentioned. And it's a holistic approach. Proper diet, proper exercise. You want to do resistance training, cardio, stretching, and balancing. Stretching and balancing is going to activate that cerebellum, really important for gait and balancing. Because if you notice, part of the aging process, people start to slowly, they slow down in the way they move. Their gait is problematic. They're having a harder time getting out of the seat. You don't want that. You want to build up the muscles. You want to strengthen your bone structure. You want to keep on activating those neurons and the kinematics so you have better muscle control and coordination when you get older. You want to drink filtered water and stay away from processed foods. Stay away from, reduce your sugar intake, right? Because sugar, high doses of sugar, high glucose levels will cause damage to your organ systems and your vascular system. So you want to control your A1C levels. You want to learn new things. And by doing that, you're activating your brain. Talk to people. Have some sort of spirituality or mindfulness to bring down the stress so your body is going into parasympathetic mode instead of sympathetic. Sympathetic activation, you start getting stressed and more cortisol is produced. It's a fight or flight response. But if you go into parasympathetic mode, it's rest and digest. Your body will age slower if you're in a parasympathetic mode. That's a holistic approach with proper diet and exercise. So please go to my store and get the C60. Follow my lead. This is what I do every day. That's the end of my broadcast. Thank you for listening. Please share the links. Ask your social media to follow me. And please get the products from my store and take them. I want you to get healthy because if we have a healthy population, our healthcare costs will be lower. If we have a healthy population, our population will be more productive. If we have a healthy population, we won't have the problems that we have today. So please go to my store and get the very high quality supplements and stack them and approach this holistic approach to your life. It works. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.